Okay, I'm running some tests here. Making sure this is working.
I like your book there in the background, Bob.
You notice that.
Yes, it's very clear.
What's really happening in the background is spring.
Oh,
That's
nice.
out the window. It's just magic.
Beautiful. Wow.
Okay, let's see how we're doing here. The Slooh show will begin in about 5 minutes, guys. About 5 minutes.
So has Michael told you that he's thinking of switching weeks for the ISON trip?
Yes, and it was very kind of you to. He so wanted to go on the same one you're going on. It was very kind of you to agree to switch if he needs it.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I'd rather go on the tour with Michael. I mean, that'll just be fun.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, guys, we're going to start in about 5 minutes.
Have you told George that we didn't find any flying saucers in his galaxy group?
No, I did. I forwarded your letter to him.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm still assuming my weather clears. It's been weird. It has been raining in the afternoon here, and then right around 11 p.m. it just clears up, and I've got a clear sky. So if that happens again, I'm going to take some long exposures of that group.
That's a very strange report, don't you think?
I thought it was really strange. I mean, the guy doesn't sound like a kook or anything. He sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
So that's what makes it strange. But it just seems like. Go ahead.
And he described the dots moving at different speeds too. Very strange.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes me think, whatever he saw that night. I would be surprised if we caught anything again.
Well, didn't he say in the second letter that he saw it a second night?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Look at. He saw 2 nights.
Wow.
And what I'm thinking are flocks of birds, because in migration season, I've seen birds at all different distances in front of celestial objects.
Mm-hmm. And they can show up as dots, I guess, going at different
I guess
speeds.
if they were far enough and maybe it was low power.
Yeah. Huh.
Maybe lit up from the ground lights or something, showing up faintly illuminated. And the galaxy is faint enough.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's see.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, that's better.
Okay, we're about 3 minutes away. 3 minutes away.
Okay. But it's whenever the G Plus thing starts on the Slooh website, I get this horrible echo. And I have to go in there and mute that.
Yeah, you got to mute it.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Do you see my first image in there, Pat?
I'm not looking. Maybe Paul could tell us.
Or Paul?
I'm just going to have a look. Yes.
Okay, great.
It's quite a tight crop on that, Matt. You might want to put a bit of boundary black on the canvas, maybe, if you can.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I can do that. Let me go in here.
Okay, guys, we're going to start up here in a few seconds. Just waiting for the live show to begin on the homepage about T-minus 1 minute. Hi, everyone. This is Patrick Palucci with Slooh Space Camera. Thank you for joining us today. It's May 9th here in the United States. We're here to provide a live feed of the Annular Solar Eclipse that's currently taking place right as it's starting pretty soon here over Australia. We're going to have about a two and a half hour show for you today. We're just getting started live here, and we're going to be pulling our feed here shortly. If you're on the Slooh.com homepage, you may be seeing some test imagery appearing. That is just from our partners out there who are running some tests. They will be imaging the sun shortly. It's morning time there right now in Australia, so the sun is pretty low. And as it starts to rise, you'll start seeing some live images coming in. We have a great panel for you today of experts and Slooh staff who will be talking today and outlining some things that are happening with the Annular Eclipse. I also want to point out that if you guys have an iPad out there, make sure you download our free Slooh iPad app, where you can actually watch this broadcast as well as do some fun activities by booking missions on our robotic space cameras located all over the world. We'll be talking more about that later, but if you do go to Slooh.com in box number 3, you'll see a demo there as well of that product. With us today is longtime Slooh friend, astronomer Bob Berman. He writes for Astronomy Magazine. Bob, how you doing today?
Great to be here.
Bob is the author of The Sun's Heartbeat, for those of you who don't know. It's a great book. I've actually read it. Bob doesn't believe me, but I actually have read it. And it's a great book, so definitely check it out. We also have Matt Francis from Prescott Observatory in Arizona. Unfortunately, with Matt, he is a little rained out right now. So what we're doing is he's going to be providing some imagery he took a few days ago, or whenever it was, of this tornado that took place on the sun. So he actually captured that, and he's going to be presenting that in the reticle viewer on Slooh.com. You can see that right now. We also have Slooh engineer and outreach coordinator Paul Cox with us. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
And guys, so here we are today. We are tracking the Annular Solar Eclipse, and you'll start seeing some feeds on Slooh.com. Paul Cox has actually started the process of screen sharing a few of them in here, and I'll click on the box here so you guys can see it. Again, the main presentation's over on Slooh, so you can certainly, if you're watching this in the G+ Hangout somewhere on the web, whether it be over in on our own space camera page or over on another site, you can certainly certainly watch it there if you like, but the main presentation is going to be on Slooh, and that's where the conversation section is. So if you are watching this and you have a question, go to the Slooh conversation section on Slooh.com. We don't monitor the YouTube ones because it just gets jam-packed and it's hard to monitor. And so just come to Slooh.com and you can ask questions to Bob or whoever is out there, and we'll take care of you there. My name is Patrick Palucci with Slooh, and we are starting to pull live feeds. Bob, what I'd like to do before we even get started here is maybe we can start with the basics to let people know what exactly is starting to happen today over in Australia as we start to look at live feeds. What's going to happen, and really, maybe make it as simple as you can. Talk about what this is all about. What is this annular eclipse?
Well, simply put, the most important celestial objects to us, the moon and the sun, will form a straight line with Earth, a perfectly straight line called syzygy. People sometimes say it's a good Scrabble word, but it really isn't, because it's 3 Y's and there's only 2 Y's in Scrabble, so you'd have to use a blank, and who wants to do that? But there it is. Syzygy, straight line of celestial objects, and what it'll mean to us is the moon will appear directly in front of the sun, leaving a ring of fire, nuclear fire, around the edge of the sun, and we're going to be seeing it live as it's happening.
So guys, what we have today is we basically have 4 feeds set up, and I thought I'd talk really quick about the feed location so you knew what was going on. We're going to be pulling one from the Northwest Territory of Australia. Gerard Lazarus is going to be providing that feed for us right now. It's just a sample pick in there. It's still early morning, so he should have sun picks coming in. We also have another one coming out from Queensland, Australia, at the Home Hill High School from NQ Astronomy with Rob Black. He will be providing us a feed as well. And we actually have another one in Cairns, Australia, which is currently offline. They are telling us that weather issues are causing it. And we have another feed hopefully coming in from Tennant Creek, which we're still waiting for it to come online. So those are our main 4 feeds. And we have another one from Prescott Observatory that Matt is sharing with us as well, from images that he took a few days ago, I believe, or sometime in the past.
Last Friday.
Tornado. Last Friday, and we can talk more about that in a second. So, Bob, if you recall last year, in November, it was in November, we had a total solar eclipse, almost in the same location. Is that normal that would happen like that?
Well, it's all part of the tick-tock gear meshing system of the moon going around the Earth and the Earth going around the sun. In order to have a total eclipse, the moon has to be in the nearer half of the orbit, closer to the nearer third of its orbit, to appear large enough to us to completely cover the sun. It's an amazing coincidence that the moon and the sun both appear pretty much the same size. I mean, we only have 2 disks in our sky, the moon and the sun. Everything else are dots. Stars look like dots, planets look like dots. 2 disks, and just imagine that. One is 400 times farther away, but 400 times larger. So the 2 appear the same size. Now, the difference is that because the moon doesn't have a round orbit but an elliptical orbit, if it's near the nearer part, as it was last November, then we get a total solar eclipse. If it's perfectly lined up but near the farther half of the orbit, then it leaves a ring or annulus of sunlight, a ring of fire around the sun, and that's what's happening today.
I've got a little diagram actually that I'm screen sharing into the Hangout there, Pat, which actually shows the kind of geometry that Bob's talking about there, the difference between the total eclipse and the annular eclipse.
Yeah, in fact, I just put that in the Hangout here. If you're listening to this in the iPad app, unfortunately you can't see this, but we're looking at the difference of the 2. So, Bob, when this eclipse happened in November, and you were there actually on the coast of Cairns with, believe it, with Matt,
yes,
watching this. And can you tell us? I mean, I think they're both spectacular, but there's a huge difference in your opinion. Obviously, you think the total solar is just almost spiritual in nature.
That's right. That's right. It's not just me. It would be anybody who has seen one. I mean, in a total eclipse like the one we had on November 13th past, the stars come out. You can actually see geysers of nuclear fire shooting into the into the sky from the edge of the moon. The animals go crazy. People weep. I don't think anyone's going to actually cry during this one. So I'd say an annular eclipse is interesting. It's fascinating. It's lovely to see that ring of fire. But a total solar eclipse is life-changing. It's life-altering. And they're also rarer. We have an annular eclipse almost every year. Interestingly enough, usually 1 year minus 11 days because the moon's orbit. It's interesting. Not just the moon goes around us, its orbit goes around us. And so the crossing point where it's on the same plane as the Earth and the Sun, called the nodes, because of the nodal month is a little different, and it moves in a retrograde fashion relative to the others. Each year, the moon crosses the nodes 11 days earlier. So last year we had a eclipse of this type, an annular eclipse, on May 20th. This year it's on May 9th. Notice it's 11 days earlier. And next year we're going to have one at the end of April. So consecutive years for annular eclipses, each time 11 days earlier.
Great, great. Well, I'm just got a note from one of our feed partner in the Northwest Territory of Australia that the sun is starting to come up, so he is starting to image right now. So we should start seeing that in the feed that's labeled, what is it called? NWT, I believe, is how we got it labeled there. Yeah, that should be coming up. And I know the guys over at Queensland are also fighting a little bit of poor weather, but he had mentioned that it was starting to clear. So we should have some updates rolling in here shortly on those two feeds.
Can I share a bit of information? Because some people have been asking in Slooh conversations on the homepage, when will we see anything? I've got some timings for you. By the way, if people can keep language polite on there, because we have a lot of kids watching our shows as well. But people might not be aware that the eclipse in Australia is actually happening as the sun rises this morning. So depending upon where they are, the different feeds, it's got to actually rise high enough to be able to do that. We should be seeing the partial phase start on that North Queensland feed very soon as he's got the clouds disappearing. That should have started by now, and we're going to be about an hour and 10 minutes before we're at mid eclipse. And the Tennant Creek, that one, hopefully if we can get that one online, that one's going to show us the ring of fire. And there's about 10 minutes difference between each feed site as to which stage of the eclipse is going to happen when. Bob might want to explain that, why doesn't everybody see it at the same time in the same way, but it's just a quick update.
Yes. Well, the moon shadow tapers like a chopstick. It gets narrower and narrower and narrower. And when the moon is large enough, that is, when it's close enough to Earth to totally cover the sun, that shadow will actually hit the Earth, creating a shadow only about 120 miles wide, 200 kilometers wide. And if you're there, and only if you're there, you'll see it as a total eclipse. Now, when the moon is too far away, the shadow completes. The umbral shadow tapers to nothing before it reaches the Earth. In that case, if you're directly under the place where it completed making itself into a little pinprick, what you'll see is the moon failing to completely cover the sun, but you'll see it's central. But if you're a little bit outside that zone, you'll see a deep partial eclipse. It'll still be very interesting. The moon will block out most of the sun, but it won't be a perfect ring, or it may not even be a ring at all. So there's a lot of different events that are available in any given eclipse, and total eclipse of the sun. So that's what we're going to be seeing. Our different feeds are going to show us at different times the different stages of the event, and depending upon where the feeds are coming from, we'll either have an annular or ring, an annulus of light, or not an annulus of light, and we'll get a deep partial eclipse. So this explains why we're going to have a lot of different things to see.
So guys, if you didn't hear me earlier, if you have an iPad app, go check out our free iPad app, download it. You can listen and watch this broadcast on your iPad, but more importantly, you can command our robotic space cameras And today is the basically the Ring of Fire day. So if you book a mission to the sun, it's going to be in your sky chart. And that's how this whole product works, is that you actually start controlling our space cameras around the world to image the night sky. So check it out. It's a free download. You don't have to buy anything until you want to book a mission on a Slooh space camera. All right, guys. So we're waiting. The sun is just coming up. I just got another text from our friends. They're just waiting for the sun to get a little higher before they can really start imaging it. So we did purposely start this a little early to make sure everything was working properly and get us rolling. Paul has actually put in a screen share of the app in here so you guys can check out what it might look like. Here's an image of the sun that someone booked, or Paul booked a little while ago. So, Bob, talk to us more about the sun in general. You know, it's funny, as I read just recently, I don't know if you caught this in the news, that now that they're saying, and this is in your book, by the way, that the sun might not be so bad for us after all. Did you catch that in the news?
Well, I'm glad they said that, because, as you know, in The Sun's Heartbeat, in my book, that's exactly what 2 chapters are devoted to. The people who are the researchers in vitamin D and for other reasons, they're saying, hey, we grew up with the sun. This is how we evolved. We need the sun for our health. And people who are hiding from the sun behind windows or slathering sunscreen on too much, they're really doing themselves some biological harm. That we need sunlight. So the bottom line, to make it simple, is that you should get as much sun as you can without burning. Burning isn't good. But get all the sun you can handle without burning, and it's good for the health, not bad for the health. Don't hide from the sun.
So, Matt, maybe we should jump into some of your imagery that you took while we're waiting for the eclipse feeds to get rolling. If you guys are on the homepage of Slooh.com, click the little arrows and go over to the Prescott, Arizona feed. And unfortunately, Matt is rained out right now. He hopes that it clears in the near future. But what he's done is he's sharing for us some imagery he took. And maybe, Matt, you can explain what we're looking at here on the Prescott, Arizona images that you put up there.
Sure. Well, I feel very lucky because I've only had this happen twice when I've been viewing the sun live, and I've actually seen a coronal mass ejection happen while I've been imaging the sun. And last Friday, I had some friends at my observatory, and they had never seen the sun through a telescope. And as we were watching, we actually saw a large CME happen. And the first image I've loaded into the reticle is a wide field image, and you can see where it's happening on the solar limb, and it's lifted off the surface of the sun and is being ejected into space. You can see the huge coronal mass ejection there on the left side. And I'll be loading much closer up images of this. There were some websites that were calling it a tornado because as it lifted off the surface of the sun, it did spiral, and I was able to catch that at a much more magnified view. So I'll be loading the sequence that I captured up to the reticle as we go through the show here.
So Bob, maybe you could tell us what is those flares. I think people, you lose sight of how big the sun is. Maybe you can give us an idea how big some of those flares are that Matt's going to be showing us.
Me? Sure.
Yeah.
Or did you ask Matt?
No, I'm sorry. I meant, did I say Matt? Bob.
Okay. Well, the sun is so large that over 1 million planet Earths would fit inside it if it were hollow. If you could unscrew the top of the sun like a mayonnaise jar and just pour Earths in, imagine that 1 million Earths would fit inside. Or if you line them up just along the sun's edge, it would take about 108 Earths just to line up. So it's a huge item. The important part is the middle 15% or so, because that's Dante's Inferno. That's the place where non-stop hydrogen bombs are going off. In fact, it's equivalent to the energy released by the sun, listen to this, is equivalent to 91 billion 1 megaton hydrogen bombs. Those are pretty standard hydrogen bombs, 1 megaton. 91 billion of them going off every second is the sun's output in energy. Usually it's written as 10 followed by 33 zeros ergs of energy, but it all comes from a little sun within the sun. The sun's core is where it's manufacturing it. The sun that we see in the sky is not, most of it is not putting out energy at all. That's the place where the energy is going through the sun. It's the convective zones. In fact, a weird thing is that 70% out from the center, one sun stops and then another one begins. So there's really three suns. There's the core, there's the innermost 70%, which rotates as if it were a solid ball, and then there's the outer 30% that rotates chaotically, where the equator spins in only about a week, where the poles spin in closer to 35 days, and so this differential spin causes all sorts of consequences. It's in that interface between that second and third sun, called the tachocline, where the magnetic field is most powerfully generated, and it is from there on outward that controls things like Matt's coronal mass ejections that he saw. Because why should the sun ever throw out material? It's all magnetism. You wouldn't think that something as mild as magnetism would control this, but it does, because the magnetic fields on the sun break, they snap open, and that's what releases the plasma, that is the broken bits of atoms that are suddenly released and hurled into space at up to 1,000 miles per second and head in our direction, causing auroras, causing damage. And Matt actually captured one of those in action, and that's what he's showing us. The sun is rather active right now.
So if you're just joining us, we are going to be pulling live feeds out of Australia. Our first feeds, I'm getting told, are any minute now. We're going to start seeing them, especially out of the Northwest Territories feed. That's NWT feed. You should start seeing that one shortly. In the next couple of minutes, the sun's just getting high enough. Right now it's early dawn in Australia, so it's a little difficult to image the event happening right now, but it should get moving along here shortly. We are also trying to pull feeds out of Queensland, Australia, at the Home Hill High School in Queensland, and we should have that one as well. So those two are looking pretty good. We're here on the show right now with Bob Berman, Astronomy Magazine columnist and Slooh friend. We have Matt Francis from Prescott Observatory, who's hopefully going to provide us a live feed from Arizona, but it's raining there right now, unfortunately. And we're also on with Paul Cox from Slooh and myself, Patrick Palucci from Slooh. We're here today. If you guys don't know much about Slooh, we own and operate our own observatories in the Canary Islands. We do have a membership program. If you go to slooh.com and hit that membership link, it's great for people who are really into astronomy and want to command our scopes and have ultimate control with FITS files and stuff like that. But if you're a casual user and don't want to get into the more difficult realm, download the iPad app. It's perfect for you. You can fly around the sky. It's a free download, and you can book missions on any object in the sky, and it'll fire up our observatory to image it. So it's pretty cool, and the image comes right into your app. So it's a neat product. It just launched about 3 weeks ago, and we're excited to have it out there. And of course, if you do book a mission to the sun today, you'll get some sort of the annular eclipse into your basically your sky photo album, which is basically what it turns into be. All right, guys. So we're moving on along here. I'm getting told that the guy the sun's coming. I know we started the show purposely a little early, but the event will take place shortly here. So Matt, any luck in the weather out there in Arizona?
No, I'm surprised that the rain coming down on my metal roof isn't interfering with my microphone here, but no, it's actually raining pretty hard. Sorry, guys.
Matt, no excuses, please. No excuse. Open up that observatory right now and just start imaging, would you? That's just part of the challenges we face in doing these live events, is that the weather is such a huge factor. That's why we usually bring in multiple feeds to help alleviate that issue as much as possible. So, all right, Bob, so enlighten us again with more sun stories. I mean, you're full of them, and every time we do a show that's related to the sun, you tell me something new. Now, is there anything that you could, that's maybe a new discovery with the sun, or anything happening that maybe there's not a wide knowledge on?
Well, you've read the sun's heartbeat. This is the way. This is the way I could nail you to the put you on the spot to see how much oral comprehension, how much you retained of the book, because every chapter is about another, of course, aspect of the sun. We talked about health a moment ago, and whether it's better to avoid the sun because of skin cancer or get more sunlight because of the cancer protection afforded by vitamin D. And you just pointed out in the news that more and more researchers are finding that it is far better to get too much sun than too little. Now, I know a lot of people say, how's that possible when there are 8,000 melanoma deaths every year in the United States? But it's estimated that if people got more sunlight, the cancer protection afforded by the vitamin D would create would save 250,000 lives. Oh, here's something. Here's something I just learned myself. There's a researcher at, I believe it's MIT, you can look this up, who has found, this woman has found, she's a biochemist, that the parts of vitamin D that you get from taking vitamin D in pill form, that is vitamin D3, is not as protective as the vitamin D, components of vitamin D that your body will manufacture naturally in the presence of sunlight. And that if for full cancer protection and all the other benefits that are that you get from direct exposure to the ultraviolet light of the sun, you need the real sunlight, not the pills. So again, the bottom line is get as much sun as you can without burning. Obviously, if you're blonde or redhead and you've got blue eyes and you know that you burn very easily, well, don't stay out long enough to burn. That's never good for you. But fortunately, most skin cancers are of the squamous cell and the other types that are very easily treatable. The risk, according to these vitamin D researchers like John Cannell, Dr. Cannell of the Vitamin D Council, is that the dangers have been overblown and that people nowadays slather lotion on them. Well, it's actually called sunscreen these days, and I'm still using the term from 20 or 30 years ago, and unnecessarily. And that, sure, you can put that on, but first get a nice healthy dose of sun before you start putting on the sunscreen. And don't put it on your kids automatically all the time, and let people go outside. Behind glass, either in a car or in an office or at home, window light blocks the vitamin D producing ultraviolet rays. You will not get any of that benefit from behind glass. So you want to direct sunlight. They say 20 minutes of direct sunlight will give you as much vitamin D in your body as drinking 200 glasses of fortified milk.
May I just interrupt a second, because we need to let people know when we've got live images coming in. So if people click on the NWT Australia feed on the home page, they'll see that Gerard Lazarus has got his first image coming up. You can see that he's got some branches in the way because the sun is just rising from his location. That's going to clear those trees in a second, but you can already see from the right-hand side of the sun this huge bite-sized chunk taken out of it, and that's the moon crossing the solar disk. So those images are just going to get better and better and better. So it's looking fantastic. Sorry to interrupt you there, Bob.
That's all right. The question that people on the Vitamin D Council, these physicians, these researchers are asking is, if our bodies manufacture in 20 minutes of direct sunlight the same vitamin D you get from drinking 200 glasses of milk, why would nature, why would the body manufacture so much vitamin D so quickly? And the answer, the implied answer, is that we are supposed to have circulating in our bloods far more vitamin D than anyone thinks is the quote normal unquote normal amounts of vitamin D. In other words, if nature produces that much that quickly, it means that's what we're supposed to get. So let's be less afraid of the sun and more willing to treat it as a friend rather than an enemy while we watch the sun today and experience that. So
Bob, what's going on right now?
Research.
What's happening right now, though, right? We're looking at this image coming in from, this is a new Northwest Territory in Australia. What is happening right now? That's the moon that's coming. Maybe you could explain to us what exactly is going on? Because that is the moon now, taking a bite right out of the sun.
It's new moon. We are approaching the moment of new moon. Now, new moon means no moon. It means we're looking at the dark side of the moon. A lot of people think that the dark side means the far side, like the Pink Floyd album, The Dark Side of the Moon. But the dark side just means the side that doesn't get sunlight, and at new moon we're facing that side. So it's black for two reasons. The thing that looks like just a bite being taken out of the moon is the dark unlit hemisphere, and secondly, it would look black anyway, even if there was a little sunlight on it, because compared to the sun behind it, it's going to be very feeble. In fact, even the full moon is 450,000 times less bright than sunlight. It's far dimmer than most people think. You'd need 450,000 full moons to equal the light of the sun. So the moon's pretty dim even when it's full, and right now we're looking at the dark side of it. So that's what's encroaching on the sun. The moon has an average orbital speed of 2,287 miles an hour. It's the only object in the known universe that moves its own diameter in an hour. So in 1 hour from now, it's going to move itself. It's going to chug along and move itself from just starting to cover the sun to fully covering the sun, or at least being central to the sun. Unfortunately today, or unfortunately, it depends upon your viewpoint, the moon will appear a little bit too far away to fully cover it, but it will be lined up, leaving a perfect ring or annulus of sunlight. That's the event that we're watching.
So now when the moon does cover up the sun, and it's going to cover it up significantly, we still can't look at it without protection, correct?
Oh yes, of course. Staring at the sun is never a good idea. There's actually been no case of a retinal lesion or burn or permanent scar on the moon of anyone staring at the sun for less than a couple of minutes, but nonetheless, even a few seconds of direct sun staring can cause some, at least transient, damage. So you want to use either special solar viewing filters or welder's goggles, shade number 12 or 14. I like 12s when the sun is low, the way it is right now from Australia, because they don't block out too much of the light. They give you a nice view. Or 14, that darkens the image even more, and that's how you'd see it. If the sun were higher in the sky, that might be better, but only use 12 or 14s. Don't get welder's goggles number 10s, which is a common shade, but supplies insufficient protection against the sun. You always want to be careful with your eyesight. Your eyesight is precious, and if you want to run to a welding supply store, they're never in the mall. You'll find them in the worst section of town, behind fences and barking dogs and ringing alarm grandfather clocks, and that's where you're going to find it in like the rundown section of town. Go in there and ask for a 12 or a 14, and then you can stare at the sun as long as you like safely.
So if you're just joining us, we're looking at a live feed out of Northwest Territory of Australia, being provided by Gerard Lazarus. Really appreciative. As you can see, the sun is just rising out there, and the trees are getting in the way, but as the morning progresses, we should get better feeds coming in. I'm on with astronomer Bob Berman from Astronomy Magazine and a longtime Slooh friend. We're also with Matt Francis from Prescott Observatory in Arizona, who's actually rained out, unfortunately, but he is showing some images he took last Friday of the solar tornado that took place. You guys might have read about that. And Ron, also with Paul Cox, Slooh's Paul Cox, as we review this. Guys, I'm going to hop off for just a quick second while I call our Queensland guys to see how the weather out there is going. Can you guys, Bob, if you don't mind, talk to us more about some interesting factoids of the moon and the sun, and maybe Matt, you can jump in there a little bit while I call the gentleman, the high school actually out there.
Actually, sure. I'd actually like to ask Bob. Bob, I've thrown a picture into the reticle taken from the 2012 Annular Eclipse that I photographed over the Grand Canyon, and I think what we're seeing there on the right side on the limb is the Bailey's beads effect. Does that look right to you?
Well, I am not seeing the image where I am because I'm not. I guess I'm not at slooh.com. I'm seeing you guys, but I'm not seeing the image that you're seeing.
I've shared it. I've shared it into the Hangout, Bob. You can see it there. I believe, Matt, that that's kind of almost a reverse Bailey's beads. That's almost what you get with a Venus transit with the black drop effect. Whereas Bailey's beads, I think you only see on a total solar, don't you? When the light is just coming through the valleys of the moon and stuff like that. But,
Right.
Bob, I don't know if you can see the image that I've shared in there to the Hangout.
I'm not seeing that. No, I'm not seeing any image at all. But I love all of Matt's feeds. One of his solar pictures is my favorite picture ever taken of the sun. In fact, if he ever wants to give me a birthday present and send me a photograph of that, I would hang that. I wouldn't even hang it in the bathroom.
Hey guys, really quick, Bob, if you're on the homepage,
There's a hint.
If you're on the homepage right now, we're getting some fantastic shots coming in now of the eclipse taking shape. The NWT feed, otherwise known as Northwest Territory, is looking good. You can see it's getting above the trees now, and the moon is making its way across the sun. So right now, this is the only feed that we have active. I'm still waiting. Queensland must be having some issues with weather. I know the Cairns was having some weather issues, and so we're lucky enough that we're in an area. If you look at the map of Australia, you'll see that we're hundreds of miles apart, I believe, between our feeds. And so it's kind of nice to have that luxury to do this because it's very easy, especially in that part of the country. It's pretty wet and cloudy there, and so this is we're pretty fortunate that we got one feed activated here. So if you want to be on the NWT feed, Matt is showing. If you're going to go to Matt's rained out in Arizona, so he's just sharing some of his previous images he took from the annular eclipse that was last May 2012. You can check those out as well. But we'll be watching this progress through the show, and we'll in this location. We'll be close to Ring of Fire, but not 100%, unfortunately. The feed that is in the Ring of Fire is not active right now. We're trying to get it back online for us, but this should be pretty fascinating right now as it is anyway.
Yes,
Pat,
the partial eclipse is fascinating.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
When we're talking, we must keep referring back to the images that are coming in because we will miss something and not point it out to people. The last NWT Australia image actually showed a prominence at around the 9 o'clock position on the sun. Now that's going to show up because of the particular exposure that Gerard was using down there. So let's keep an eye on that because we may get another view of that prominence, especially as the eclipse goes on, and Gerard's going to have to change the exposure time of the camera for the shots. So we may see, just keep an eye open for these prominences, these kind of flares on the outside of the solar disk there. So.
All right,
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
going to get another computer screen in front of me too, so I can see.
Yeah, you need to see them, Bob.
And comment directly. I'll be right back.
Or use your iPad, Bob. Just use your iPad. Anyway, so yeah, we're looking at a live feed out of Northwestern Territory in Australia. This is our main feed for today's show. It'll last a couple hours. We're heading into, I think annularity technically is around another 30 minutes or so. So we'll get some great shots coming out of here. Looks like he's got some good weather.
We've got slightly, we've got slightly longer than that. We've got about 35, 40 minutes before we get to, well, with those feeds, we're not going to actually get an annularity, which is the ring of fire. We're going to get what's called a mid-eclipse, which is basically the maximum partial phase of the eclipse. Right. But we are still chasing down Tennant Creek, which is the ring of fire feed that we were hoping to bring you.
Yeah, we'll keep working on that. These things, sometimes we're in these far-out locations, bandwidth is a huge problem, as you can imagine. And this particular one is really challenging.
I'm just sharing in there, Pat, a map of northeast Australia, and this is the Northern Territory and Queensland. And this track, the track of this particular eclipse, unlike the total eclipse at the end of last year, really it's mainly over very sparsely populated areas, and that's part of the problem of actually getting feeds. Now, a lot of people have gone off on trips, but they haven't even bothered taking, equipment with them. They're treating it as a purely visual event because they haven't got power out in out in these remote regions, as you say. They haven't got internet and stuff like that. So, thank you very much for those who have stepped up and who are providing us these live feeds today.
Yeah, Matt and I were in the approximate area, Fort Douglas, last November 13th for the total solar eclipse, which we also brought at Slooh. We also broadcast at Slooh, and we definitely saw what clouds meant there. As you get to northern Australia, a lot of people don't realize it, but that is firmly in the tropics. We were in the tropics, and this eclipse is even deeper in the tropics. And of course, with the tropics usually brings cloudy weather. I'm now looking at the images that we're all seeing, and it's quite lovely. We can see clearly that there are prominences on the solar edge, which is fascinating, as the moon continues to chug its way along and cover the sun. I also noticed that one of the images that we can access here on the home page at slooh.com is Matt's stunning image taken only a few days ago from his Prescott Observatory, and that is so beautiful at the sun's edge as we see solar material. We're talking about billions of tons of it escaping from the solar edge and leaking into space. And we also see lots of beautiful details on the sun itself. Fascinating. Of course, our lives revolve around the sun. There is no celestial object that calls the shots, that dictates whether we live or die and what conditions we have, not just weather, but whether we animals even occupy the planet, except for the sun. So when we see an event like this, it's not just a passing intellectual thing. We are seeing the mother and father of us all, of the entire planet, and watching the other influential object, the moon, now crossing it. Think of all those thousands of years of civilizations who went berserk when the moon would cover the sun. Remember, even Mark Twain in the book Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court had his hero wave to the natives, and his life was spared because he predicted a total solar eclipse. Well, in ancient times, from the Chinese onward, being able to predict eclipses and observe eclipses was the most powerful thing. This is a very deep, visceral, ancient experience, what we're seeing today.
Hey, Bob, can I...
Go ahead, Paul.
Bob, I've just pulled up on the screen a kind of zoomed-in shot of the Gerard's feed, and somebody's asking what our prominence is. Somebody else actually asked, are they prominences? And somebody else answered, no, they're tree branches. No, those, what I'm sharing on the page now is a zoomed-up view of the edge of the sun, and those are prominences. Bob will tell us in a second what prominences are. But I also just want to point out to you, just in front of the moon, where the moon's going to come over, you can see this dark patch here, and this is a group of sunspots. I'm pointing to them over the image. So if you can zoom in on that image on the home page to the solar disk, on the sun's disk, you'll see these dark patches, and those are sunspots. So Bob, back to that, question, what is a prominence? What is it that we're seeing sticking out from the side of the sun here?
All the phenomena that we're seeing, whether it's a flare, prominence, a coronal mass ejection, many of them come from sunspots, some of them come from coronal holes, but all of them are magnetically driven. All of them are plasma. Plasma is a fancy word of just saying broken atom fragments. Here on Earth, everything that we're breathing, our bodies are made of neutral atoms, whole atoms, each made of a nucleus made of protons and neutrons, except for hydrogen, where you usually only get the proton, surrounded by electrons. But what if it breaks? What if there's so much heat or energy that the atom is torn apart? Well, then you have the individual fragments. The electrons are loose, the protons are loose. And that's what we see on the sun. When that happens, then those particles are guided by magnetic fields. Neutral atoms, they don't even notice magnetic fields. But plasma, or broken bits of atoms, are channeled by magnetic fields. So when we're looking at a prominence, we're seeing plasma, broken bits of atoms, that are channeled by magnetic fields that are 3,000 times stronger than elsewhere on the sun around sunspots. So these are places where there are loops and different shapes of magnetic field lines that can snap open and disconnect and reconnect, releasing some of this material into space. The sun is also surrounded by a corona, or fantastically hot, 2 million degree hot level of plasma, all because of these magnetic disconnections and reconnections. Please remember that the sun's surface that we're looking at is only 11,000 degrees Fahrenheit, about 6,000 Celsius. 11,000 degrees. The plasma, and especially the corona, are millions of degrees. So the phenomena that we're seeing is being whipped to frenzied speeds because of the sun's magnetic field. That's what we're witnessing now as the moon is covering the sun.
I want to give you guys a quick update. I got an email, or actually a Skype chat from our friends in Queensland. They're having bandwidth problems right now. They're hoping to get it fixed, but they're not able to upload anything or provide any feeds right now. So I turned off the feed right now for them. Hopefully they'll get it back online shortly. They'll let me know. But we are getting a fantastic view out of the Northwest Territory from our friend Gerard. So we're very excited about it. And you can see the eclipse now forming pretty well. And I love the color of this eclipse because it looks just like our homepage. So if you guys want to check out the eclipse, make sure you go to slooh.com. You can go to this conversation section. Paul Cox is monitoring it. He will relay those questions to Bob or whoever, and we'll get that all figured out. Also, I want to point out our Slooh iPad app, guys. If you haven't downloaded it yet, just go to the App Store for iPad and download it. It's free. You can watch all our broadcasts. We do more than just these shows. We have a lot of shows that counting down all the time. We have a Comet ISON coming up in a couple days. We have a penumbral eclipse coming up in the 25th, I believe, and we've got a bunch of other things always happening out there in the sky, and we cover it, and these shows are free to the public. Please do consider membership to command our space cameras. That's for mainly hardcore users, but if you're an app guy and you're a casual user, just go book a mission on one of the celestial objects in there, and you're supporting Slooh, you're supporting our ability to provide these free to the public. And today, for the sun, for instance, if you do it, you're going to get one of these fantastic images in your sky chart coming in. So that's what it's all about. So please book a mission to the sun today to get your annular image into your sky chart on your iPad app. But you can also go check out Saturn, or go check out Neptune, or maybe M51, Whirlpool Galaxy. All these are fascinating objects, and you get the image in for your own sky chart by commanding one of our space cameras. So please consider that as well. Paul, maybe you could tell us the color. Is the color this pinkish color because of the filter that he's using out there? Do you know what's going on potentially with the equipment, like why that would happen, or what?
Yes, it is. Yeah, Matt, I don't know if you agree with this. I don't actually believe that's what we call a calcium filter. That actually looks like what we call white light filter, but it just happens to be that color. So.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. I don't think it's a calcium K. It looks like a white light.
Yep.
It's kind of it's a nice color too. It's a Mother's Day color, kind of. It's got that Mother's Day look. So it's kind of nice as well.
I'm looking at Matt's pictures also on the home page. One of the feeds, if you click on those triangles, those bluish green triangles. What would you call it? More blue or more green? Are triangles there?
I vote blue.
They're blue. They're bluish.
Okay, so you click on that, and you can get to the Prescott, Arizona feeds of the edge of the sun, and the series of the pictures that Matt has taken. I mean, this is peerless solar photography. This is fantastic, as we see objects that are leaving the surface of the sun. And that's not easy, because the sun has an escape velocity of 380 miles a second. Here on Earth, if you want to get out of here, you need to go 6.9 miles per second. At least that's how fast you have to go if you want to escape with a single upward blast. On the sun, it's not 6.9, it's 380. So for this material to actually leave the sun, head off into space, and some of it actually reaches Earth, some of it is quite mischievous when it reaches us and does some damage. Some of it is benevolent in that it creates beautiful displays of the northern lights, such as some of the tours that we take people to see. A good display of the aurora can even go as far south as the southern United States, even as far south as Cuba at times. And it all starts with what we're seeing from Matt Francis's fantastic images there, showing a prominence being spewed out into space. As for coronal mass ejections, which are even more violent events, we didn't even know about those until the 1970s. That's kind of a new and ultra-violent event that you get for the same cost.
So, in fact, guys, just really quick, you know, Matt does a lot of live shows as well. We do live solar shows all the time, and you get, I mean, the last one we did with you, Matt, was just amazing. That's why I'm bummed out. You're rained out, because it would just be awesome to be showing the sun so up close while we're looking at these live feeds out of Australia of the annular solar eclipse.
Well,
so,
I'm bummed out too, Pat. And yeah, I just want to, this image that I have up here is my favorite one of the series, because you really can see the spiraling effect of the prominence here, which I think is really interesting. But yeah, I have to say that these guys out in Australia that are trying to give us feeds, I can really appreciate what they're trying to do. When Bob and I were there to cover the total solar eclipse, we had bandwidth problems as well. And I just want to reiterate too what Bob said, differentiating an annular from a total solar eclipse. Now that I finally have seen both, and there is nothing like a total solar eclipse. It's really not even close. Not to downplay an annular eclipse, they're beautiful, but boy, to stand in that highly polarized light of a total solar eclipse is, I assumed it would be something like akin to dusk or dawn or something similar to that, but it's really nothing like that at all. It's completely different.
Yes, the difference between that and annularity is like the difference between you have one date with a girl and then you never see her again, between falling in love and meeting your soulmate, or going to a symphony, or looking at the warm waters off Hawaii and actually swimming in it. You know, this is a major life experience, and Slooh, of course, will cover every total eclipse that we can. We've been trying to get Pat to actually go out and see them. It's interesting to see them covered by Slooh. There's nothing like seeing them in person, though. So I hope more and more people can actually go out. They play hard to get, because.
Well, Bob, I'm gonna take you out to the hybrid one. Isn't it like in some remote part of Africa?
That one on November 3rd this year, Pat, is only 1 minute long, and then once the eclipse path finally reaches a place in Kenya where the odds are closer to 50-50 of being clear, the eclipse lasts only 13 seconds. So it better not be behind a cloud for those 13 seconds, because that's going to be a tough one this November 13th.
Hey, Bob, got a question for you here. Got a question for you. We know that the lunar orbit is changing, and somebody's asking, how long will it be before we never get a total solar eclipse again, with the moon gradually moving further and further away in its orbit?
Yes. That's a good question, and there's different estimates that I've seen. The moon is indeed leaving us at the rate of 1.5 inches per year farther away, and if you add that up to where the orbit finally reaches a point that the shadow doesn't reach us, it comes to something like 40 million years from now before there won't be any totalities. But, you know, that's not the end of the story. That happens because as Earth gradually slows down, thanks to the moon's pull on the oceans and a little drag against beaches, as the Earth slows down, and it's slowing down very slowly every century, at the end of every century, a day is only 1/700th of a second longer. Imagine that, a long lifetime. At the end of a long lifetime, each day is only 1/700th of a second longer. than it was when you started your life. That's a very gradual slowdown, but that is a loss of energy, and energy is never lost in the universe. So the moon gets the energy that Earth loses, and it uses it to go to a higher orbit. Higher orbit means slower moving but further away from Earth, and that's why it's spiraling away. But in the far distant future, when it stabilizes and the day and the month are the same, they'll be both 40 days long. Our spin will be take 40 days for us to go through a day. The moon will be 40 days to make an orbit. At that point, that should be the end of the story, and that should be stable. But the sun then starts speaking up and has a say. What the sun does is its tidal forces keep slowing Earth down even below that point. And from that point forward, the moon then loses energy and starts spiraling in closer and closer and closer, and then eclipses begin again. Then we start to get total eclipses in the far, far distant future. At least we do for perhaps a couple of billion years before the moon is then destroyed by coming too close to Earth. It will come within our Roche limit, and then we will have rings like Saturn's. Unfortunately, Comet Ison that Slooh covers every single month, because we're checking it out as it's coming closer and closer, Comet Ison will venture within the Sun's Roche limit on Thanksgiving this year, and may well get destroyed for the same reason. So we'll have rings, eclipses will stop, and then they'll begin again. Comet Ison may or may not survive, and that's the Reader's Digest version of what's going to happen in the next few billion years.
Hey, just a quick update, guys, from our feed at Northwest Territory. A cloud has gotten in the way. We're trying to shoot it out of the way. As you can see, the eclipse is progressing nicely, so we don't want to miss much. So hopefully that will be the case. Our other feeds that we have are having the one feed in Queensland, unfortunately, is having a major bandwidth outage in that area. It's at a high school, a local high school, the Home Hill High School in Queensland, and so I don't know. Their tech guys are working on it, so hopefully they can come back on with a feed shortly. And the other feeds, I know one of them was having weather issues as well, and another one I think is another bandwidth issue. So this is a very difficult track. You can see on the Slooh homepage in box number 2, we did post the path of this, and you can kind of see where it's traveling. And this is actually over very remote areas of Australia. And a couple of funny stories really quick, guys. I don't know if I told you this. When we were working with our feed partners, I was telling them they got to get into the the path of annularity. I don't want them on the fringe. And they were saying, "Bloke, are you crazy? There's crocs everywhere out there, man. I'm not going out there." So it's pretty funny talking to them about it, because they were like very adamant that it's very dangerous and where this eclipse was taking place. So it made it really difficult to cover. But that's a lot of the challenges that Slooh faces when we do events, and some of them take place in areas that are not highly populated or have bandwidth and all that. So as Bob mentioned, we do have shows always counting down. The next one is coming up, I believe, on Sunday night. Maybe I think Mr. Cox is going to be leading that one on the Comet Ison update. We'll figure that one out. But our shows are always counting down, so you can see when the next one is going to happen. And we do cover a lot of stuff: asteroids, the comets, the planets, solar, and of course these type of events as well. Also, make sure to download our iPad app. If you got an iPad, download our app. It's free. You can get access to all our programming, but more importantly, you can book missions to celestial objects where you actually get to command our network of observatories and image the sky. So it's really a cool product. It's inexpensive to do, and it's fun especially for entry-level folks. And there, of course, is a membership, too, on the Slooh homepage. If you're a hardcore astronomy geek and you love to control our scopes at a specific time, get FITS data and stuff like that, then become a member. That's probably your best bet. It's more expensive, obviously, but it's we've been around since 2003, so it's not like we've been around, and we have a very popular and strong membership base. It's worldwide. All right, guys, so we're still looking at the eclipse taking place. I'll try to get an update shortly from our feed. Paul, is there any questions from Bob?
Yeah, I was just going to try and butt in there to answer a few of the questions. One person was asking they want to see an image of the sun without a filter. Well, that's simply not possible. The sun's so bright that no camera can take a short enough exposure without being filtered to cut a lot of that light out. Otherwise, it would just come out as a total white mess. The only time you can really do that is during a total eclipse, when most of that sunlight, of course, is blocked off by the sun. Somebody else has been asking if you want to become a Slooh member, what's the best device to use? Anything that supports Flash, so a browser that runs Flash, and that's when Slooh members view their images live, because Slooh takes these live images and presents them to you. But if you want to go to bed, it also saves it to your library and stuff like that. So Internet Explorer, Mozilla, any browser that supports Flash, and you'll be fine with that. And I'll catch up with some of the other questions. There may be problems with the iTunes store at the moment, but the Slooh app is in the iTunes store. It's there to download. Demand might be phasing iTunes a little bit. So
I have a question for you, Paul, that
Yes.
somebody asked me. I'll pass it
Yes,
on
Bob.
to you. The question is this. If the sun is a star, why can't we see it at night?
Because it's on the other side of the world. So if we had a see-through Earth, we'd be able to see it. But very good, Bob. You like trying to catch me out with those ones, don't you?
That's an actual question. I'm not making.
I think I've mispronounced. Did I say Carnes? It's Cans, right? Someone emailed me
Cans,
with a correction.
It's Karen.
I'm being
Hey,
called
listen,
out
Pat.
already.
Most of us have stopped trying to correct your pronunciation, mate. So we gave up on that as a lost cause years ago.
Yeah, man. Don't even attempt it anymore. I've given up on all these astronomy terms. Anyway, guys, so we're looking at. I just got an update. The clouds are thinning out at the Northwest Territory feed. He expects to have some more feeds coming in shortly.
Good.
So we should be. We're heading into. Where are we at, Paul, in the whole progress here with the?
We are about
Annularity.
10 or 15 minutes away for the main Northwest Territory feed. Actually, no, that's going to be a little bit later. That is going to be at 10 to the hour. So we've got about 20 minutes before we reach mid-eclipse with that one. Bob, there are a couple of questions that did just come in for you. One of which we're noticing on that one feed that there seems to be some darkening on the kind of the area of the sun to the right, about the 4 o'clock position, and somebody was wondering whether or not there was a name for that. That's pretty difficult to tell because a lot of that might have to do with exposure and then local conditions.
It does. There is something that the sun suffers called limb darkening, in that when you look along the edges of the sun, it's not as bright as the rest of the sun. Jupiter shows that very prominently as well, and the moon very famously does not. The Greeks noticed this, of the ancient times, that when you look at a full moon, it does not look three-dimensional. That is, the middle doesn't look brighter than the edges. Rather, it looks like a disk that's like a dish that's painted onto the sky. There's no dimensionality. Why should the middle of the moon be the same brightness as the edges if the sun is illuminating the middle from straight down, but illuminating the edges at an angle? Shouldn't that dilute the sunlight and make the edges of the sun look a lot, edges of the moon look a lot dimmer? Yet it doesn't. In fact, this lack of limb darkening on the moon was a major mystery, and answers to it have gone back and forth among scientists. Now it's believed to be just in the nature of the way the particles on the moon, the semi-translucent silicon, because most of the moon is silicon dioxide, in other words, a sandy type material, that reflects light back to us like a movie screen does. Another alternate hypothesis is that it's shadow darkening, shadow hiding, that the little particles on the moon's surface cast shadows and therefore hide bits of the moon. On the sun, the limb darkening is simply because the angle that we're gazing at is not intercepting the rays as directly as when we look straight down. But that's not what's happening here. This is some artifact of the filter.
Yeah. We've got another couple of questions, one of which is about how often this type of eclipse occurs. And I'm actually screen sharing in the app because maybe, Bob, you can also talk about the way that a solar eclipse is always paired with a lunar eclipse. And what I'm sharing in at the moment is an image which I took through the iPad app of the partial lunar eclipse that we saw just 2 weeks ago. So how often do these solar eclipses occur, and why are they associated always with a lunar eclipse?
Hey, Bob, could I jump in really quick before you answer that? I just want to let people know that you've got another awesome shot rolling in from Northwest Territory. As you can see, the moon starting to cover up the sun.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Yes, it's really beautiful. The what was the summarize the question again? I lost track.
It's about how often do solar eclipses occur?
Oh yes, how often?
And why do they occur in association with lunar eclipses?
Well, because the moon's orbit is tilted about 5 degrees from the Earth-Sun plane. When the moon is new or full, it has to be full for us to see a lunar eclipse because Earth's shadow has to fall on it. And it has to be new in order to create a solar eclipse because it has to block the sun. But for either of those to happen, there has to be a precise alignment in all 3 dimensions of the sun and the moon and the Earth. And yet the moon's orbit has this 5-degree tilt, which means that many months, most months, as at new moon, the moon will scoot from one side of the sun to the other, but pass above it or below it. It can pass 10 moon widths above it or below it. So usually it misses the sun, and on the other side of the orbit it misses the Earth's shadow. But if what's called nodes, the exact alignment point, the crossing points from where the moon is above the plane of the solar system, the Earth-Sun plane called the ecliptic, to going below, or the other way around when it's passing from below to above, if that alignment is perfect, then it'll produce one type of eclipse. And that alignment doesn't go away right away. A fortnight later, the alignment will usually be good enough so that we'll then have, once we've had a solar eclipse, we'll usually have a lunar eclipse a fortnight later because the alignment still is rather good. What won't happen is if you get such a good alignment that you have a total solar eclipse, you will not have a good enough alignment to have a total lunar eclipse, or the other way around. In other words, you'll get a partial eclipse that will frame, in some cases, frame on either side of the total eclipse. So you can have up to 3 eclipses happening at once, each 2 weeks apart, but the central eclipse can be total. The ones on the edges will be partial, simply because the alignment is no longer perfect enough for the nodes to be exactly aligned. Now, 6 months later, as we go around the sun, the other node will then be aligned, and then we'll have another eclipse season. So every year brings us 2 eclipse seasons, and those seasons precess by about 11 days per year. So that's the mechanics behind the eclipse sequencing.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Somebody's just saying that they've just spotted another prominence just on about the 9 o'clock position. No, sorry, it's on the 7 o'clock position of this live image that we've got coming in. Bob, isn't this phase of an eclipse often referred to as the bull horns?
Well, it certainly looks that way. The thing about the crescent, crescents are, of course, are creepy kind of things. They're spooky things. On Earth, we don't really see crescents. I mean, they're crescent-like objects like bananas and croissants and I guess some beaches, but we live in a minimally crescented neighborhood. As we look toward the sun, there's only 3 objects that can throw crescent shapes. That's Mercury and Venus and the moon. This is a kind of an artificial crescent because the moon covering up the sun partially like this is creating a blockage that creates an artificial crescent. If you lived on Venus or Mercury, there'd be no crescents in the universe. You'd never see a crescent anything. If you lived on Venus and had a telescope, you could see one possible crescent alone, and that is that of Mercury. But here on Earth, we get both the crescent moon and the
Okay.
crescent phases of eclipses.
Okay, thanks.
So-
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Hey, Matt, are you looking like your weather's still pretty bad, huh? No go for you?
That's correct. In fact, I'm going to sign off, guys. Yeah, the weather here is just getting worse.
Okay, well, buddy, I appreciate you trying to come on and give us some live images out of Arizona. That's Matt Francis from Prescott Observatory. Matt, we'll definitely set up a solar feed with you sometime in the near future on a live show. That would be great.
That would be great.
I thought it didn't rain in Arizona.
Exactly.
That's what I thought
That's
when I
why
moved
Matt
here.
moved there. Yeah.
Exactly.
It only rains when we try to do a live feed.
It seems
Well,
like it.
it is very commonly known throughout the amateur astronomy community that as soon as somebody buys a new telescope, you're guaranteed a fortnight of clouds. Matt actually kind of, if you build a whole observatory, then I think that probably goes into months and potentially years. So,
Oh, no.
Good luck with that one, Matt. Hopefully the summer will bring you some better weather down there.
I think so. All right. Thanks,
So-
guys. It was great to see all
Thanks,
of you
Matt.
again.
Thanks, Matt.
Bye.
So, guys, I just want to give you a quick update. We're looking at a live feed out of Northwest Territory in Australia. I want to do a special shout-out to Matt Tree over at Sirius Optics, who's helped us with retaining this feed, who's being manned by Gerard Lazarus. He's in the Northwest Territory, so he's out there up in a pretty remote place. So, as you can see, he's providing us with some fantastic imagery coming in. I love this coloring, by the way. It looks really cool. And it's we just really want to say thanks, Gerard. We really appreciate all your help. And we'll definitely, you know what, Gerard, we're going to do is we're going to make a donation of Slooh books to his school of choice. So that's part of the help that he's providing Slooh. And we just want to say, Gerard, thank you. We're going to also try to get him on the show a little bit later as we get through towards the partial phase here and out. It's getting closer and closer. It looks like, Paul, towards.
Yep, we're about 10 minutes away from mid-eclipse from this location. The image I've just zoomed in on is the one on the home page, and you can see just at the 3 o'clock position this time, we've got what look like 3 enormous prominences. One of which. The one slightly below, it's quite subtle, but if you see that, it actually looks like it's detached from the sun. So it's actually a flare. It's not being pulled back by the magnetism, the magnetic fields of the sun, and it's actually managed to escape, presumably, Bob, at some horrendously high velocity.
Yes, it's really fantastic to see an eclipse with this kind of prominence activity occurring is very unusual. Of course, this is the year of solar max, and so we have more activity on the sun than there has been in years past. But to actually see it firsthand is just a beautiful.
Well, a lot of this as well, Bob, has to be down to the guys who are giving us these feeds at the moment, because you can see that the sun itself is almost overexposed, and I think he's probably doing that quite deliberately so that we can see these prominences and the fainter features out on the edges. So it looks absolutely brilliant. And if you take a look on the right-hand side, you can just see there's one tiny bit of brightness that's kind of breaking through probably a valley in the moon, which is what, of course, we see quite a lot with Baily's beads on total solar eclipses. But this is an absolutely stunning image that we've got here. It looks absolutely beautiful. So the guy's doing a fantastic job. Bob, there was a question. I better feed it to you while I remember it. We can deal with it whenever. Do solar eclipses change the weather here on Earth?
That's very interesting. You know, a whole chapter in the sun's heartbeat. I mean, I have to mention that because the book just came out, and it's all about the sun, about fantastic things that that most people don't know about the sun. But the reason an entire chapter is about that is that weather and the sun are controversial and fascinating to everybody. What happens during a total solar eclipse, or even a deep partial like today's, is that the local weather will cool off, sometimes quite dramatically for the full hour leading to the eclipse. Birds and animals are very aware of this and will react accordingly. And often the cooling will produce extra cloudiness because the air will have cooled below its dew point. And unfortunately, this can be a cloud-producing phenomenon. So we always have to be aware of the weather consequences of an eclipse. Of course, the sun by itself, I don't mean just because the sun warms the earth and all the things we know about the weather, but as the sun goes through its 11-year cycle, there are major changes in weather and some controversial ones dealing with climate. It's pretty accepted that during sunspot minima, especially the deep one we've just had in 2005, 6, 7, when there were no solar storms, the sun was blank for hundreds of days at a time, Earth cooled down, and that recent lack of activity on the sun has come to our aid in terms of global warming. It's made man-made or anthropogenic effects less striking. So the sun has come to our rescue a little bit by having a gentler cycle, a longer solar minimum than anyone alive has ever seen. That's why we spend so much time in the sun's heartbeat with this, because it affects us today and affects what we're doing in terms of man-made climate change. And many believe that the sun is now beginning a extended period of lesser activity. This solar max appears to be less powerful than most. We've just had a deep solar minimum that was deeper than most, and most solar astronomers think that the next solar minimum will also be deep. In other words, this could be another extended cycle, maybe not as dramatic as what we had from 1645 to 1715, when the sun essentially stopped its heartbeat and went silent. But this could be an extended period of inactivity that will help the Earth, that will help cool down the Earth and partially counterbalance global warming.
Thank you, Bob.
So if you're just joining us, we're looking at a live feed from the Northwest Territory of Australia. We're on with astronomer Bob Berman, along with Paul Cox and myself, Patrick Pellucci. We're looking at this. This is an amazing feed that we have right now. It's live, and I just want to do another special shout out to Gerard. That this is incredible. We really appreciate the work that you're doing out there. I know it's a difficult location that you're currently at, but we do when we do events like this, we plan for 4 to 5 feeds, and you can see obviously why. If you go click on those triangles, you'll see a bunch of feeds offline. And what happens is typically weather systems come in. You name it, bandwidth problems. There's just a lot of things that could happen that could cause a feed not to come on. So what we've done, and in Matt's case in Arizona even, we were hoping to give you some close-up views of the sun live as well, but he's rained out. So here we are with 4 or 5 feeds not working, but the main one here, as you can see, is spectacular, and that's really what all it counts. So we're really excited about it. We do a lot of live programming, celestial programming, so please come back to Slooh.com. But if you want to be updated, you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, like us, do all the different G+ stuff, circle us. We'll keep you updated on upcoming events. The next one is always counting down on the home page, so you can look there, or you can download the Slooh iPad app. I have it right here. It's free to download. You can watch our broadcasts all the time as well there, but you can also book missions within the app itself to command one of our space cameras. So it's a really neat product. It just came out about 3 weeks ago, and you should check it out as well. And please, you guys, by booking missions on our iPad or by becoming a member of Slooh, you're helping support us in this free program that we provide to the world. So please, for today, if you've got the iPad app, book a mission to the sun, and you're going to get one of these fantastic images of the annular solar eclipse. In fact, Paul, I think this one would be one of my candidates that we would be a part of the.
I agree.
So you would get this, and then you can come back a year later in the app and show someone, hey, I remember doing that on Slooh, or you can book a mission to Saturn or what have you. There is a demo on the homepage of Slooh.com. If you go there, Paul's actually got one right here. This was a show that we did on the sun not too long ago with Matt, actually, and that was one of the images that people could get on that event. But if you do book missions to other objects, you are commanding one of our space cameras, like Saturn or the Neptune, or maybe the Whirlpool Galaxy, what have you. So please consider that as well. Bob, I really appreciate you coming on. We've got some time left in the show. We're going to keep broadcasting for at least a couple hours here today to give you guys a full look of this eclipse as it occurs. Hopefully the weather continues to work for us on this main feed. As we're looking at this, I know that particular feed was having some cloud issues as well, but it seems like he's still able to image effectively. So hopefully we can continue with the feed. We're in about an hour and 15 minutes in this broadcast, so believe it or not, guys, I have this down for at least another hour. So I hope you guys have enough stories to fill the time. Paul, is there any questions that are coming in on the Slooh Conversation section?
Yeah, they've got one from Andy Perry, and he is asking what the best way of viewing an eclipse visually is. And the first thing, obviously, we'd point out is always the important one. Anything to do with the sun, never look at it directly. Certainly never look at it through binoculars or telescopes directly. They have to be properly filtered. The filters have to be in absolutely perfect order. Even a small pinhole will do damage. It will let through enough light to damage your eye. So really the best ways are, you can buy eclipse glasses and stuff like that, but even those have some danger because they, once again, they're only made of plastic mylar usually and can easily be damaged. Usually looking at some kind of projection, so you can project an image through a telescope onto a piece of card. You can have a pinhole camera, or you can just use, somebody else was asking what's the best kind of telescope to image an eclipse, and usually nowadays it's just a DSLR camera with a medium zoom lens on it, or you can get adapters to stick your DSLR camera, your digital camera, on the back of a small telescope. So a small refractor, probably only about 60 or 75 mil or something like that in diameter, will give you some pretty good high-resolution views of an eclipse like this. If you do that, you've got to buy one kind of filter or another. And when it comes to filtering the sun, there are several options. You can buy a white light filter, which basically just cuts down the amount of visible light which is reaching your eye or the camera, or you can buy what are called narrowband filters, and they for the sun are commonly hydrogen alpha filters or calcium filters, and all they do is they filter out all of the sunlight except a very narrow bandwidth, and that's how you start seeing some of the really fine detail on the sun. So Matt's images that we were looking at earlier, those are hydrogen alpha filter images. So that's the kind of equipment, but please, everybody, just don't ever be tempted to look at the sun through a telescope which is unfiltered.
So I got some clarification from Gerard. He says he's using just a hydrogen alpha filter right now, it sounds like.
Oh, right, okay, that's interesting.
For this broadcast. Yeah, he sent me that.
This looks to me that it's very close to maximum eclipse. It also looks like a Cheshire cat smile, doesn't it?
It is. People have been calling it all manner of things. A smiley face, a Cheshire cat, I think, has been the most popular one that's been mentioned there, Bob. And it looks like Gerard has also cut back the exposure time a little bit as well, so we're not seeing the prominences so much. But what we are getting is this absolutely fabulous view, very well balanced, of the moon cutting over the sun. One of the other questions was, there's somebody who's watching our coverage and they're also watching it live in their own backyard, and they were talking about where they were seeing the moon cross the sun versus where our live images are showing, and it seems to be coming from the opposite direction. That's only because of the way an equatorial mount works. So when you're viewing, if you can imagine, the sun rises in an arc, but what an equatorial telescope mount does is always make sure that north is always aligned in the same spot. So as the telescope tracks the sun and the moon across the sky, what you actually get, you land up with, is a rotation in the images of the sun and moon. So.
Yeah, it's awesome. He said that he's still fighting some clouds. I think that's why you're seeing a little discoloration, a little bit of the sun It seems like, but he
Well,
says
you know
he's
me,
still,
Pat. I always love that actually on eclipses. I think a little bit of passing cloud adds such a lot of depth to the images, you know, because what we're looking at here, you know, is a fairly uniform image, but as soon as you start getting any sort of cloud in front of it, it adds this extra depth. Don't you think, Bob?
Absolutely. I'd also like to comment on, now that the eclipse is very near mid-eclipse, look at the size of the moon. Instead of seeing it as a bite, a blackness that's just the same as the surrounding space, see this now as presence, a looming black presence in front of the sun. In other words, now it's easier, I think, to see it as two circles, the sun and the moon in front of it. We can see it, and we can also now clearly see that the moon is going to be smaller than the sun. It's not as large a body in appearance as the sun, and that's because the moon is only a few days from its monthly apogee. It's the 9th of May right now, and it will be at its very farthest point from Earth for the month on the 13th. So because of that, it's almost as small as it possibly can be. I'll point something else out too that very few people realize, which is that the moon's orbit changes shape all the time. It's not, it doesn't have the same degree of ellipticity or eccentricity, to use the right word. It becomes rounder and then more squashed constantly. And right now, this month, the moon's orbit, rather these days of this month, the moon's orbit is more eccentric, more elliptical than normal. So the moon is actually farther from us. It will be at its farthest most point on May 13th, but it's farther from us than usual. And because of that, you can see it's a very tiny moon that's intruding onto the sun's disk, and that if you drew a line, in this case directly toward the right, so that the moon would be central over the sun, it won't even come close to totally blocking it. There indeed will be quite a thick ring or annulus of sunlight, and that's the nature of the eclipse we're seeing today.
Bob, I've got another question that's going to come up to you, but I just wanted to show this on the screen share, because one of the things that's really cool to do in the app is to book multiple moon missions. You know, we were just talking about the moon, and the next question is about the moon as well. What we do here, if you just book to a moon mission every few days or something, with each new image you can start following the lunar phases. So what I'm screen sharing here is a 2-day-old moon, and then a few days later you can see the phase getting larger and larger. And this is a particularly cool sequence because this whole lunar cycle finishes just coming up here. I'll get to it in a second. On the 25th, when we watched the partial lunar eclipse here on Slooh, which was really cool. But that's a really great way of using the app, and you know, the planets or other things as well that show quite a lot of difference and change. Pat, somebody was asking about the types of telescopes and filters and cameras that we use for the Slooh space camera. So this is the equipment at the Slooh Observatory in the Canary Islands. It's a world-class observatory site. It's about 8,000 feet on top of a volcano in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We've got a variety of telescopes there, ranging in size from a small wide field one, 65mm, through to a 1/2 meter Goliath. That's going to be back online very soon, we hope. We have attached to that very specialist CCD cameras. These things, we have to take very long exposures of things like galaxies and nebulae, stuff like that. So the telescopes that we use, I'm just going to pull in here a couple of images in the app actually to show you the kind of images that we get from those telescopes. Galaxies and nebulae are really, really faint objects. So one, you need very big telescopes to grab it, but you need very long exposures. So here I'm just showing an image of what's called the Black Eye Galaxy. And this uses one of these ultra-cooled CCD cameras. They're cooled to about -40 degrees centigrade below whatever the ambient temperature is, and that keeps the noise down. in the images. And they use a variety of filters. They have what are called luminance filters, red, green, and blue, some hydrogen alpha filters as well. So that's the kind of equipment that we've got in the Canary Islands Observatory, which you can control by two means. There's a normal Slooh membership, and that gives you kind of a huge amount of control over it. But the app is literally just a single press of the button, and you order a mission for that particular object. So that's pretty cool. Bob, back to the question for you. You talked in the last lunar eclipse show that we did about the darkness of the moon and how dark it is, the surface albedo, and saying it was darker than coal. The question is, why then does it look so bright when we see it in the sky?
Well, whatever we see is always a comparison to the surrounding objects, because our eyes, the nature of our eyes, both our pupils change their size, of course, and the retina changes its sensitivity. It's almost like different types of film are being swapped in all the time. So depending upon the ambient light, we will reset to get the proper exposure. Now, even though the moon is quite dark, not actually quite as dark as coal, but it is as dark as an asphalt road or a macadam road, a paved black surface, a tar road. It's as dark as that. And you'd think that against the darkness of space, the moon would just disappear. But no, because background space is darker still. And after all, sunlight is hitting the moon as dark as it is. So as a result, the moon falsely can look white against the dark background. But here's my favorite stat about that. And Paul, you're going to love this. I may have mentioned this a few years ago. But take the fact that the moon is actually 450,000 times less bright than the sun. Okay? That's the first fact. And then take the fact that a very black object, let's say a black cat, is about 2,000 times darker, less reflective, blacker than white typing paper, okay, or printer paper. All right, here's the two stats. A black cat is 2,000 times less reflective or blacker than white, shiny printer paper. The moon is 450,000 times less bright than the sun. Put those facts together, and you come up with an astonishing realization that a black cat seen in sunlight is actually 2,000 times. I said 2,000. It's actually, take that back. Black cat is 200 times darker than typing paper. Okay, now we're ready for the punchline. A black cat in sunlight is 2,000 times brighter than white typing paper seen by the light of the moon when it's full. Now, white printer paper by the light of the full moon looks quite white, doesn't it? Yeah. If you go out on a moonlit night with some printer paper, that white paper will look white. And when you see a black cat in sunlight, that black cat looks black. But if you could see them side by side, if you could somehow see the black cat lit by sunlight next to the printer paper lit by moonlight, full moonlight, you would then find that the black cat was no longer black, nor was it merely white. It would be so dazzlingly white that you couldn't even look at it. It would cast shadows from objects all around it. It would make objects cast shadows. And that black cat would now appear 2,000 times whiter than the white typing paper. So the black cat is not actually black. It only looks so in comparison to the objects around it.
Is this a trick question, Bob? I think you lost me at the black cat at the very beginning.
It's been very popular in chat, Bob. People have absolutely loved that description. So, by the way, there is a sunspot visible at the moment, Pat, in the current image.
Okay.
If you just look at about 1 or 2 o'clock on the area of the sun that we can see, and there's a lovely, lovely sunspot, which is just rotating out of view now. The sun, with the sun's rotation. Or us going.
So I'm going to be inviting in Gerard shortly here into our little hangout panel. He's going to give us an update on what's going on in his neck of the woods out there in Northwest Territory, Australia. We want to really also thank Matt Tree from Sirius Optics there. I believe is also in Queensland, for helping us out with this. And we had up to 5 feeds today of this event, and anyone who knows astronomy, anyone who has a telescope and tries to go out, knows how weather plays a major role in these doing something with astronomy. And certainly on a live event like this, it takes place at a specific time. This is why we do come up with 5 feeds. It's so easy for a feed to get knocked out, whether from a technical issue or, of course, the weather. So
I think it's most of the feeds, Pat, on this one, I think, have probably been affected by crocodiles.
Exactly. Yeah,
I haven't actually been able to reach our guy in Tennant Creek at all, which is a little bit concerning, So,
yeah, he could be. He might be in the belly of a croc right now. Yeah, the path of annularity of this particular event goes over very remote areas of Australia. I think one of the guys was telling me from Australia, almost all the population lives on the ocean of Australia, around the whole continent. So you kind of get this, this thing is going kind of down the upper middle part and over the tip, and there's just not a lot of bandwidth and all that stuff around. So anyway, but we're fortunate. We've got some great views coming in from our friend Gerard, and we'll bring him in here shortly to kind of give us his take on what's going on. Just want to point out that we do more than just this. Slooh Space Camera does a lot of live programming. You can already see the Common ISON special show counting down. We do a lot of other stuff. We got a penumbral lunar eclipse on May 25th. We got a supermoon event on already on the schedule. The schedule gets updated. Paul and I update it weekly, so we're always looking up. Maybe a comet comes zooming in, or an asteroid, or something unique, or something happening in the planet. A little while, like last year, I remember a comet went and hit Jupiter. So I think that was last year, and we were able to cover it live within 24 hours. So we do a lot of programming, and the schedule is always getting updated. So make sure you follow us on Twitter, Facebook like us, stuff like that, or G+ circle us, so we can keep you updated, or just go to the homepage. And also.
It's an important point, Pat, because we see a lot of people coming into this kind of arena, and they come in for one event, they find out how difficult it is, and they disappear fairly quickly. We never hear from them again. We have been going now. This year is going to be our 10th anniversary, isn't it? At Christmas, right. Christmas Day 2003 is when Slooh was launched. So we've been around, and we're going to be around a lot longer. The Slooh app, we banged on about it tonight, but it's the future. It's how people are accessing the internet nowadays. And what we've tried to do with this app, I'm sharing it in the Hangout once again, is try and take away any of the complexity or the barriers. It's so difficult to get into astronomy. When we all started, it just seems like there's such a lot to learn, and it's really difficult to even kind of get on the step ladder, if you like, of astronomy. And what we've done in the app is make it so simple. You can just go in there. You don't even have to know what's visible, because we tell you. You just hit a little button, you say Slooh's top missions, and we give you a weekly list of the biggest and brightest and best, most beautiful objects to view, and you just click one of those. So what have we got this week? We've got a classic galaxy, M81. We've got the exploding galaxy, the beautiful Ring Nebula, which I was showing a minute ago. Saturn as well. We've just had our Saturn opposition, so it's still best viewed at this time of year. And then this week, because we're looking at a solar eclipse, so that means that the moon is in front of the sun, which means it's going to be a new moon over the next couple of days, which means that the nighttime sky is going to be very dark. So all of the objects that I picked, Pat, for the top missions in the Slooh app this week are faint, fuzzy objects, which are viewed best when there's no moon in the sky. And there's a couple of my favorites there. There's the antenna galaxies, the Whirlpool galaxy. Let me just show you how good the Whirlpool Galaxy looked last week, Pat. It's looking absolutely stunning. And all you do is you just click on that button, like you said. If you haven't already got an image of that particular object, you'll just see an icon there. You just tap the icon. This little box comes up. It tells you all of the interesting information about that object, its distance from Earth, what constellation it's in, and stuff like that. And of course, it's showing you where in the sky the object is as well anyway. But all you have to then do to book a mission on the Slooh telescopes is press the Start Mission button. And that will automatically go into the main Slooh schedule, and one of the Slooh space camera telescopes will point to that object when it's best viewed in the sky, take an image for you, and we give you all sorts of updates as well. So if there's any kind of problem with the weather or anything like that, we tell you about it. But then, before you know it, sometimes the same night, sometimes a few nights, you'll get your very own image of the object that you booked. It's absolutely terrific. I think I think you've done a brilliant job on this part. I wasn't involved with developing this, but it's going to make astronomy far more accessible. And of course, those people who want greater control, who want to put their own coordinates in and do their own processing and stuff like that, you know, you can get a Slooh membership for that and control the telescopes. Yeah.
And you get and then also you guys get access to all the broadcasts that we do, and there's an advisory section that Bob and I actually cut every couple of weeks to help you guide you through the sky and what's going to be fascinating to look at an image for that week or so. So check it out. It's a free download, and if you do want a controller of our space camera, it is an in-app purchase. Most of them are $1.99 US. You know, some are $2.99 and up. Just depends on the object. So check it out. That'd be great. And it looks like we're getting some more fantastic images coming in from our friend out there, Gerard. I'm going to invite him in here shortly, Gerard, to join our panel to talk about what he's been doing out there as we're kind of wrapping this up. You can see now the moon is now moving away, it looks like, Bob.
It's moving away. It's clearly the mid-eclipse is over, and notice that it has uncovered some interesting detail too. There's like a little sunspot group there, and
yep.
It's very cool.
And there were actually some questions on this on the Slooh homepage in Slooh Conversations. Somebody was saying, well, we haven't seen totality. Well, Bob was saying earlier that this isn't a total solar eclipse, it's an annular eclipse. This particular feed that we're looking at here was only going to be a partial eclipse, so that even didn't get to a full annular phase. So there's that one. Bob, there is another question. We were talking about solar eclipses always being linked to lunar eclipses as well, and of course we've got this lunar eclipse, a penumbral lunar eclipse on the 25th, which we are going to be covering, but maybe you can tell us why that's not going to be a visually spectacular event on the 25th of May.
Well, because every object casts two types of shadows. If you look behind you on a sunny day, you'll see your main shadow. That's the darkness on the, let's say, the sidewalk behind you where the sun is fully blocked. And then there'll be a fuzzy extra area cast by your head. You'll see it very clearly where your head's shadow hits the ground. And in that zone, an ant, let's say, crawling in that zone, would see the sun partially eclipsed. It's not a very striking or dark shadow. Well, just like that, the same thing. Earth casts two shadows. We've got our umbral or central shadow, and then we've got a penumbral or outer shadow, and the moon is only going to venture into the outer part of the shadow. So the full moon will only slightly darken. There won't be any well-defined shadow edge, and that's what is coming up.
Well, I heard you guys say that before. Oh, this isn't going to be spectacular. But then last couple weeks ago, we had a partial eclipse that I was being told it was not going to be spectacular, and we were blown away from this incredible feed we had out of Dubai about how it looked great. I mean, so we never know. We never know. We might get some shadowing. We may, maybe, probably not. But I'm always going to tell people that it's going to look amazing.
comment on the Slooh chat there, Pat. Somebody saying instead of trying to push our software, in their opinion, maybe we should have been discussing having another working feed. Well, you know, I take offence at that. Unless you've actually tried to pull together an event like this, live astronomy over the internet, the person obviously has absolutely no comprehension whatsoever of how complex an exercise this is. And frankly, we make no apology at all for pushing our app, as you say. Without it, Slooh can't function. Without it, Slooh couldn't bring these live images of this solar eclipse to everybody free of charge. So maybe get your head screwed on a little bit. Sorry about that, Pat.
That's all right. That's all right, buddy. I know you don't like. That's great. You know, it's true. So,
look at this latest live image that we are bringing everybody live around the world. We have this stunning image which is showing a huge number of features. Maybe Bob can tell us the kind of features that we're looking at here, because I can see at least 3 different types of solar features in this latest image.
Well, yes, and that's one of the nice things about this eclipse. Even though we have only one of our feeds, thanks to bandwidth and cloud issues, you know, you can't help that. We had enough. I'm still addressing that other person. We had enough feeds so that we could have reasonably covered it if there were no weather and bandwidth issues, and we still got this marvelous one. Now, this one of a deep partial eclipse is showing us at the moment. Not only could we see the relative sizes of the moon and the sun, which I find very striking because it really shows you that when the moon is near its apogee, it's really smaller looking than the sun, and all the textbooks that say that the sun and the moon appear the same size, that's only approximately true. Here we've seen that directly and no questions asked, and you know, one picture is worth 1,000 words. But we've also see a detail on the sun. There's an extraordinary amount of prominences, eruptions of solar activity leaping into the sky around the sun, more than I think I've ever seen in any previous partial eclipse. Thanks to the H-alpha filter, we're looking at a very narrow part of the sun's emissions. Specifically, we are looking at 65, 63 angstroms. And I can see from the detail here it's probably a ½ angstrom bandpass. So we're looking at a very, very narrow part of the sun's emissions. And this is what's letting us see the kind of detail that you would never see through a filtered telescope. This is not just mere filtering. We're seeing much more than that, although we've also had white light images as well. Those details along the edge of the sun, and we're also seeing a nice sunspot group as well, is due to the fact that that this feed is varying its exposure time. Sometimes it's doing the correct exposure for the sun and the moon, which is underexposing the prominences. Sometimes it's slightly overexposing the sun, but letting us see these prominences and really showing us how here on this year of Solar Max 2013, how much solar activity is going on in the sun. And this will affect Earth. It changes our weather. It changes the amount of auroras that we see, the intensity of auroras, how far south they go, and even some of the mischief that the sun goes and goes ahead and does to our satellites and to our grid work, our electrical grids, causes damage to pipelines. And it's one thing to read about it, and it's another thing to actually see the solar activity before our eyes, and that's what we're seeing as a ancillary benefit of watching this eclipse. Very cool.
So I just invited in Gerard. Hopefully he can join in. Gerard, if you're listening, I know you are. Just look for your main account. I know you have multiple accounts, so I only have the one circled on the page. So please try to join through that account, and we can talk to you directly from your site there. We have approximately 45 minutes left in this broadcast. I do want to thank astronomer Bob Berman for joining us today. He's been with Slooh for quite a long time, almost from the beginning, I believe. And so, Bob, it's always great to have you on. And Bob writes for Astronomy Magazine, so he's a columnist there. You can pick up some of his articles there. Or he's also writes books, and you can find Bob's book, The Sun's Heartbeat. Bob gave this to my dad, actually, for me. You wrote it in here somewhere. There it is. See, I don't know if you can see that personalized message from my dad. I gave this to him for Christmas, but yeah, it's a great book, and Bob is a wealth of knowledge, but he really knows how to share that knowledge. Because I find that astronomy is so complex and so mind-bending, mind-blowing that it's hard to communicate it to us novices. So we always love to have him on, so he always educates me. I blow away my friends now at parties. Bob, you should see me at a party. I just regurgitate everything you say in the shows, and they're like, really? Yeah. So it's cool. I also want to thank Paul Cox for helping out. Like Paul was saying, putting on these shows is really difficult. Slooh's a small business. We're not some big conglomerate or anything. So it's very difficult for us to put these on, and it is time consuming, and there's a huge technical task to make them happen. So, without Paul, we wouldn't be able to do this. So thank you, Paul. And our members. Members help support Sloohs. So, do consider membership, or at the very least, go book a mission on the iPad app. It does help fund all this stuff. And we could do a lot more with partners all over the world, including our own facilities. So please take a look at that as well. Here, let's see here, guys. I'm looking at the eclipse. Where are we at with it right now, Bob? Are we?
Well, look at it. Isn't this? It's really interesting. We've seen the maximum eclipse, and the moon is obviously retreating from the sun now. As I said before, it moves 2,287 miles an hour, and we're watching its orbital motion. Its orbital motion is slowest when it's near apogee, as it will be. We're only 4 days from lunar apogee. It changes its speed as it goes around Earth. So right now, it's actually a little bit slower than that. It's closer to 2,300. I'm sorry, 2,210 miles per hour. But still, hey, that's 3 times the speed of sound. And again, it's one thing to read that in a book, and it's another thing to watch it right in front of us. As the moon moves, what the moon is doing. This is what Newton realized, and Galileo. Galileo set up some ramps with metal balls running down them because he was trying to figure out how gravity works. And he had these different ramps at different slopes, and he'd have balls rolling down one ramp and going up the other ramp. And he realized that whatever angle the ramps were, a ball would roll down one and go up the other and just reach the same height as he released it from the other ramp. So he realized, well, that's how gravity works, and came to the conclusion that if the moon were falling, like down a ramp, but we're going horizontally, because when he let a ball roll down a ramp and then go horizontal, it would just keep rolling for a long time until friction stopped it. So he realized maybe the moon is rolling horizontally, and it's actually falling by gravity, but falling completely around the Earth. So that's what the moon is doing. We're seeing it fall around the Earth, which it does at this speed, in such a rate that it never gets closer to the Earth significantly, and so it never really increases its speed, even though each month it speeds up and slows down in its orbit, but it doesn't overall increase speed, and we're watching it happen.
Bob, there was a question actually, and it's why I screen shared in this map. Somebody was saying, where is the path of annularity now? And this goes back to the feeds that we were hoping to bring you tonight. And by the way, telling people in Slooh Conversations, we were very clear on that with the feeds that were down this evening. So we haven't pulled the wool over anybody's eyes. But where the path of annularity is now is over the Solomon Islands. They're a group of islands in the southwest Pacific. So I'm sharing it on this map now. And in fact, the people there at this time, just on the northern island, are seeing that annular phase of the eclipse. And after them, I think it goes past one other island group, but otherwise you'd have to be in a boat somewhere in the middle of the Pacific to be able to see that annular phase of the eclipse.
Also notice in the current feed, and this is just beautiful, I would take this image right now showing all of these prominences, including the ones on the bottom where you have one prominence that has escaped from the surface of the sun. That doesn't mean that the material might not fall back onto the sun, but for the moment, it's disconnected from the sun's surface. This is such a beautiful image, including some sunspot groups on the image, especially one at the lower right, that I would take this over an annular image. Now, I don't want to play sour grapes here, but the truth is the moon is so far from Earth during this particular annular eclipse that instead of a delicate ring of fire, as we have had in recent annular eclipses, this was going to be a fat ring. If that annular feed did not have the bandwidth problems or the weather problems, it was going to be such a fat ring surrounding the moon. I'm not at all sure it would have been as aesthetically pleasing as other annular eclipses.
Yeah, in fact, the one last year, Bob, that was pretty cool. We had feeds, if you recall, in New Mexico, and I believe Matt Marula was in California in that feed, and we had some spectacular images coming in from there. But I have to tell you, I really like this color that Gerard has put out here. I think it's just, it was really cool when it was in the crescent, almost a crescent shape, and you had the prominences coming off. So it was. I thought there was some pretty good.
This is like fuchsia, isn't it, or pink?
Right. Exactly. So, well,
it's a very feminine color, wouldn't you say?
It is. It's very Mother's Day like. I was, with Mother's Day coming right up on Sunday out here. Paul, do you guys celebrate that?
We had it a few weeks ago.
Okay, so ours is this coming Sunday. So
well, we all know that you guys run behind our Brits, you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh dear, there's me. I've just offended the other half of the Slooh Conversations people.
Yeah, you're gonna get some blowback now. But yeah, what's amazing about this too is Bob's actually in upstate New York. I'm in California. Paul's out in the UK. This live feed that we're getting on the Slooh homepage, slooh.com homepage, you can see, and we do stream it in here once in a while on the Hangout, is out of Australia.
And Matt was in Arizona.
Yeah, Matt was in Arizona. So it's amazing how technology is really bringing the world together, and so it's cool. It's definitely cool. Well, guys, we're coming down to our last 30 minutes or so. Gerard's having an issue trying to get into the Hangout.
Oh, that's a shame.
Yeah, so I don't know if he's going to be able to come in or not. Hopefully he will. But if not, Gerard, I'll touch base with you after the event. Really appreciate your feed tonight or today. It's awesome. You can see the moon now moving away, and I tell you, it was spectacular. It started when we first started the feeds. It was early morning there, so we didn't really have anything the first 10-15 minutes of the broadcast. But then it just, fortunately, the skies cleared a little bit, and Gerard was able to bring in more feeds for us. So it was awesome. And it's too bad that the folks out at the Home Hill High School in Queensland, Rob Black at the NQ Astronomy, they had a nice setup out there, and they just had a huge bandwidth outage in the area, and it was very unexpected, and this happens, unfortunately. And that actually happened to us a little bit in the last Total Solar. We had a little bandwidth issue as well. So it's unfortunate that happened, but Rob, I appreciate your help. And we also had some other feeds lined up. Near one of them, I believe, what was the one called that was in the path of annularity, Paul?
It was Tennant Creek, and what's interesting is, Pat, that I haven't even been able to get through on a landline to them. So I'm not quite sure what's happening there. I know that there were quite a few. It was quite a popular destination to be down there. And what we did have when we covered the total solar eclipse last year was all of the mobile networks were blocked up. And the problem is down in Australia that even their landlines, usually go over Wi-Fi or some kind of radio transmission across very long distances. So it doesn't take very much activity at all in Australia to gum up the system entirely. So, apologies to everybody that we couldn't bring you that ring of fire, the full annular phase, but we did say that we had lost that feed at the beginning of the show. But even so, I haven't been disappointed, mainly because we've seen so much detail. I mean, these prominences that have been appearing have been absolutely wonderful. And somebody did comment on Slooh Conversations why are we seeing prominences on some images and sunspots on others, and also to other people's feeds as well? Why the difference? And yeah, the person was right. They were guessing that it had to do with exposure time. It has to do with two things, actually. The type of filter used, a different type of filter, different bandwidth, will show different features of the sun in a different way. It also matters how clear the view is, how good the focus is, but it also, a huge amount of it with the sun, comes down to the exposure time. Because to get the really faint details, we call them faint, but that's only proportionate, the prominences take a longer exposure. But when we take a longer exposure, then it tends to burn out the details on the actual solar disk, like the sunspots. And what a lot of solar astrophotographers do is they take multiple images at different exposures and combine them. So they will cut out the solar disk to get all of the prominences there, and then take another image at an exposure time that shows the sunspots and the surface detail, and then they basically put them together, and that's how you get some of these absolutely stunning images. Then they're usually composite photos rather than single instances. Hey Bob, we're seeing this slight darkening again, aren't we, on the other side of the sun on this latest image?
Yes, no doubt an artifact, as you know. Interesting now to watch the retreating moon, and I would urge everybody who has seen this, who has joined us tonight, people around the world, to look for the now that the moon is no longer new. We just saw the moment of new moon about 45 minutes ago, the exact moment of new moon. When will we be able to see what's commonly called a new moon, but it's actually the hair-thin crescent as it emerges in the western sky after sunset? Well, certainly 2 nights from now, it will be clear as a thin crescent. But listen to this. On Sunday night, Mother's Day in America, look for this same moon, now a substantial crescent next to the planet Jupiter. Jupiter is retreating. We're saying goodbye to it. This is its swan song as it leaves us for the season, falling into the solar glare. We will see this beautiful crescent moon as it now retreats from the sun and separates itself by a goodly number of degrees by Sunday night, and hover right next to brilliant Jupiter. So be sure and look for that right after sunset, as soon as twilight is deepening on Sunday night, if it's clear wherever you live.
Sorry, Pat, there's one question that I'd like to cover. Somebody's asking, is there any way that they can get the one of the images from the coverage today? Well, there are 2 ways. We've still got the Pinterest button on the Slooh homepage, so if you've got a Pinterest account, you can just press that and it'll paste the current image straight to your Pinterest board. Or of course you can use the app and you can book a solar mission, and we're going to be picking the best image that we've had throughout all of this coverage, and that will be the one that we'll deliver to users' apps. So sorry there, Pat.
No problem. So guys, we're down to our last 30 minutes of this broadcast. As I always have been saying throughout the broadcast, Slooh, we do a lot of different stuff. We do have a Comet ISON show, a monthly show that we've been doing, tracking this comet that's going to be coming in at the end of the year, and is designated, it could be one of the best comets ever, I'm being told, or we don't know yet. There's a lot of hype around it, and we're covering it now. We can see little parts of it zipping through the sky, a little tail, it's off and on. But Bob, maybe you could give us a quick update on ISON. Why is this so spectacular?
Well, it's it has all the earmarks of a great comet. It's headed right for the sun. It's going to skim only about 700,000 miles, less than 1 sun width, above the sun on Thanksgiving. And Matt Francis, who was here earlier on the show, and myself, we have a science astronomy tour company, and we'll be going down to an optimal site in November to catch Comet ISON and see it and photograph it before perihelion, before it possibly destroys itself by the sun. But what Slooh is doing, which I think is so marvelous, is that once a month almost like a time-lapse photography thing. We're looking at the comet as it's marching toward us. It's now within the orbit of Jupiter. It has crossed into the constellation of Auriga from Gemini, and by the time it reaches naked eye visibility, it'll be crossing from Leo into Virgo, and just then, that is in mid-November, it should pass the naked eye threshold. So it's very exciting. The Comet ISON shows are very exciting too. I sometimes join you guys for that, but I know Sunday night you're going to do one.
That is correct. And we got a bunch of other stuff on the calendar. We add it weekly, so just come back to slooh.com, download the app, or just follow us on Twitter, Facebook, like us, Google Plus, circle us, any of those things. We'll keep you updated on the events that we're doing. We've got about 30 minutes left in this broadcast. As you can see, the moon is now leaving, and these have been a fantastic feed. I'm blown away. I just love the color scheme of this and how it came together. It was very close to. Bob had mentioned before, Bob, that even at Ring of Fire, it would have been pretty similar to what we were seeing. I mean, I know we would have gotten a whole ring, but we had a pretty good crescent view. So that was probably, what, 85%, you think, partial? What do you guys think?
It's always hard for me to estimate that. I can't really. I don't want to say something that's wrong.
It was 81.17%.
Oh, there you go. So that's pretty good. So anyway, Paul, very good. You're like Spock. You're like.
No, I just happen to have a piece of paper that I printed off before the show.
Excellent, excellent. So if I'm Spock, that means Bob is Leonard Nimoy? I guess that makes me Captain Kirk. Oh, that's cool. All right.
Bones,
anyway.
maybe.
Bones, that's right. A movie's coming out, actually, any day. All right, guys. Well, what else? I'm going to see if Gerard can get back in here. I'd love to have him on. It'd be fun to have him on.
Yeah, that would be really cool to do that.
While you try to get him on, folks, I'm going to jump out, and my wife has just made a quick dinner for me. I've been on, as you know, 2.5 hours. So let me duck off for 10 minutes. I'll wolf down something, and I'll be back. I don't.
Wow.
All right,
you
Bob.
get food as well. Gosh, well looked after
He's
there.
going for a food break.
That's right. I'll be back.
See you later,
all right, buddy. Thanks, Bob. So anyway, we're here looking at the last part of the annular eclipse for 2013, live from Australia. As we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, when we do shows like this, we set up multiple feeds, 4 to 5 feeds. And when we did the Google Doodle event back in 2011, we had 3 feeds, and one of those was down, and we had, we had everything checked out there. So it always happens, and we're fortunate enough to get this one pumping in. So it's great that Gerard was able to come through for us. The weather wasn't too bad, so that was great.
Pat, I've just been sent by Joe Brimacombe, who's in Cairns. He was going to be providing our Cairns feed, which was only a partial phase, and he couldn't get online because he was totally clouded out. But he has emailed me a whole series of images, which I'm just sharing into the Hangout now. And you can see he was a lot further south. Cairns is a lot further south and further north or south from that path of annularity you get, the lesser eclipse you get. But this is his series of images I'm just sharing in now. So
that's cool.
barely got it through the clouds, But thank you very much, Joe. Because I think what people don't understand, Pat, is that the feeds that landed up being offline tonight, those guys did just as much preparation work to prepare the feed and to set all their equipment up and stuff like that. So it's really disappointing for them as well as for us that we couldn't get a couple of those feeds online.
Yeah, it's too bad because I wanted to help promote the organization NQ Astronomy. Rob, they do a lot of outreach stuff, and he was hoping to be able to talk about the school kids. They had like 300 school kids there in the local area participating in this event, and I'm hoping they at least got to see it properly. I don't know, I haven't been able to really get through to them except for a few chats, and I'm assuming they were able to see it at least, but they couldn't provide the feed live at all. The whole bandwidth was down. So anyway, yeah, I really appreciate everyone's help with this stuff, because it is that's what we rely on to do these far outreaching events. We do need partners to help us with the feeds, and we can't do it without them. And they're more than happy to help out. They want to show people what's going on out there in space. And I honestly think, Paul, we'll be doing more stuff with these guys in Australia on a lot of different levels, and I'll explain to you later what I mean by that. Because it's clear to me that they've got the right equipment, and they've got the technology, and they've got the the passion for it, and that's exactly what the kind of people we love to work with. So
yeah, I mean, I think it's important to say that, Pat, that sometimes when people accuse us of selling Slooh, we do these events not only we do these events because they're enabled by Slooh members. If Slooh members didn't buy a membership, if people didn't use the app, we wouldn't be able to put on these free events. I can understand the arguments if we were charging, the general public to see these things. Right. But, you and I know to our cost, just how much effort, time, and money it takes to put on these events. But we don't complain about it because we love doing it. Like so many people who are into astronomy, we're passionate about it, and it's such an accessible science. So it's a really good entry point to get kids interested in science and technology generally. If you think about what we see on a nightly basis with Slooh, we're seeing people sitting on their sofas at home. Well, fortunately, we don't actually see members sitting on their sofas at home. But we've got members around the world, anywhere, via the internet, going online with their laptop or computer, and they're controlling this observatory, which is at a world-class observatory site in the Canary Islands, with equipment that the investment there is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they get to control that direct from their own sitting room. And now with the app, people can do that as well. Pat, before we talk about the image, which has just come in, so everybody get on the home page and look at the current image that's come in. Jennifer asked a question in chat, asked for some clarification about the prominences and sunspots that we're seeing, and whether or not they were coming and going, and that's what we were seeing, or whether or not it was just down to the exposure time. Well, the answer, Jennifer, is both. The primary reason why sometimes we see the prominences, other times we don't, is about the exposure time. And the guys, Gerard's been deliberately changing the exposure time, so sometimes we get to see the prominences, sometimes we get to see more detail on the solar disk. But also, these features have been changing during the coverage. We can see now this current image. Just take a look at it. It is absolutely stunning. And we're seeing here these dark patches on the face of the moon. These are probably prominences that we're seeing in plan view. So they're probably huge loops of matter, of ionized gas and material, which are being pulled and pushed in these magnetic, from these magnetic dark spots. So this is where the magnetic fields, kind of hot spots in the magnetic field, exit the sun's outer atmosphere, and it channels all of this highly charged high energy particles into these beautiful loops. And when we see them on the face of the sun, we see them like this, kind of dark patches. But when we see them in silhouette, that's when we see them as prominences coming off from the side. Now, you can see there's one there that we saw at the beginning, but this one, Jennifer, has definitely changed during the course of the show. This one has virtually left that part of the sun. So it's it was so powerful that it's managed to break loose, or is in the process of breaking loose of that incredibly strong magnetic field that the sun generates. And that will just shoot out that huge amount of high energy particles. If those faces, by the way, those are what Bob was talking about earlier, the coronal mass ejections, if they happen to come in Earth's direction, then like it did in Quebec a few years ago, it can knock out entire electrical and communication systems, because basically it generates too much voltage in the lines, electromagnetism. So, but these are absolutely stunning images. I think this is one of my favorites so far, because we're seeing both the prominences, we're seeing the surface detail. Over on the right hand side we've got sunspot group, and then we are still seeing the moon egress from its eclipse. Let's have a look at the timing here, Pat. It's about another 30 minutes, 20, yeah, it's 30 minutes, and we're going to see the moon finally leave the solar disk, and that will be the end of this eclipse from this particular location.
So Gerard has been texting me, just so you know. He says
the
his only
interview.
exposure. Yeah, the text interview. Exposure time only changed once during entire capture. Gerard, you know, maybe you could share with us your exact location. I know you said to me in degrees, but is there a small town where you're at, or on a mountain? Perhaps you could let us know.
Is he on Groot Eiland, which I believe, Pat, was an island, but I think that's where Gerard is based, but I'm not sure whether he travelled for the eclipse. But his website says that he's on this island, which is Groot Eiland. I'm sorry if I pronounce that wrong, which is in the Gulf of Carpentaria.
Interesting. And by the way, I'm back, Bob Berman. That was a 7-minute dinner. I'm back with you guys for the.
Oh, he's back. Let me guess what you ate. You had a let's see, a sausage sandwich with peppers.
I haven't eaten yet.
Green beans.
No, I had a sirloin steak with broccoli and roasted red peppers.
That just
Bob,
isn't fair to
very
share
nice.
that kind of thing with hungry fellow presenters. Bob.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Yeah,
But
Yeah,
it must be 1 a.m. where you are. How could you have not had dinner yet?
Because I've been prepping for this show, Bob. In fact, I haven't eaten for 3 days.
Bob comes on the show. He's all relaxed, happy-go-lucky. Paul and I are like
we're
frazzled
frazzled by the time the show starts. You know, I mean, last night, for instance, I mean, it's 1 o'clock here, coming up to 1 o'clock here in the UK. But Pat and I last night were texting and emailing all last night, his time and mine, trying to sort out these last-minute feeds, because our very original feed partner had to pull out due to ill health. That was what actually put us in a fix a few days ago. So Pat and I went out, and we basically been knocking on just about every single person with a telescope in Australia. We've been knocking on their door saying, "Hey, listen, can you help us out?" You know, I'm just pleased, Pat, that we've had, you know, these images from Gerard, because they have been utterly spectacular. And you know, until you've actually set up one of these things with your equipment, you're usually not in your own backyard, you're remote from somewhere, you've got power to sort out, you've got to align the telescope, get all your gear together, make sure you're safe, make sure the equipment's safe. Then you've got bandwidth issues and all sorts of other stuff that can get in the way. It can actually be really quite nerve-wracking knowing that your images are going out to tens of thousands of people live. And you know, if Gerard has actually been listening to the coverage tonight, when he found out his was the only feed that we had online tonight, I'm sure that pressure must have multiplied tenfold. So
he said what's the island you were saying? What was the island you said he was on before you get to Bob? You said it was Grito Island?
Groot Eiland.
Yeah, that's where he's at.
Groot. Yeah, well, that's in the Gulf of Carpentaria. So it's kind of. I'll show you on a map. I'll get the map together and I'll show you where it is, Pat.
Yeah, no problem. So go ahead. What was your question for Bob?
I've just got to find it again now. So say something interesting in the meantime. Here we go. Are there coronal mass ejections? Just before you came back, Bob, I was talking about we saw some fantastic flares, and one that looked like it was actually leaving the sun and being blown off from the sun, and we were saying that when these are big enough, we can get these coronal mass ejections. And the question is, are there CMEs large enough to affect the entire planet at once?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We had in 1859, there was a coronal mass ejection that caused such havoc. At that time, the only thing that would carry electricity were telegraph wires, which had only been up for less than 20 years around the world. But electric charges were of such magnitude that they almost melted the wires, and they knocked telegraph operators to the floor unconscious, those who couldn't jump out of the way of these sparking wires. Now, that was in 1859. In 1921, another huge coronal mass ejection caused such electrical discharges that it set fire to a building in a New York railway station, and caused such amazing auroras that they could be seen from rooftops on New York City. And in the West, people thought the dawn was coming. They got up and they got dressed. A lot of people didn't have clocks back then. And much lesser so, and on March 13th, 1989, a coronal mass ejection knocked 1/4 of the population of Canada into darkness. And this was at a time of year when a lot of people relied on their electricity for heat, and made garage doors throughout North America go up and down all night long.
That must have been a bit worrying.
Destroyed and damaged a lot of Earth satellites. So yeah, they can do quite a bit of mischief.
Hey, listen, I've got a question. Well, it's not a question, but it's a comment. Pluto Savior in Slooh Conversations on the homepage made a comment about, wife going off to cook supper while presenters, present the show. Yeah, you're right to have that kind of concern, because it has been male-dominated tonight. But what I really wanted to share with you was there are a huge number of Slooh members who are female, amongst the most active, and a few of them have joined us on shows before. In fact, one regular, Christina Feliciano, she joins me on the Slooh Live Universe show that we do every Sunday night, and yeah, if you want to see a good spread of people, and just join the Slooh community, and you'll see that there's a very, very good mix. I'm pretty passionate, actually, about getting science out not only to kids, but actually to girls. It's really important that they understand that they can have some fantastic careers in science and technology and engineering. And actually, in my experience, they have a far better aptitude for a lot of that stuff than blokes
changing.
do.
40% of the young astronomers now, the graduates, are women, whereas not too long ago, and we're talking about in the era of Mount Palomar, the telescope, the Hale telescope, it was women only. In fact, when Deborah Elmgreen, who just retired as president of the American Astronomical Society, the Professional Astronomers of America, she is president. But she, back when she went to Princeton, she was the first woman who was accepted as for the astronomy program. It had been male only. So there's been, fortunately, a lot of change in terms of women entering astronomy. I'm not sure if that commentator meant it as as praise or as a pejorative that the wife had cooked dinner. But if you wanted more praise for her, she has been a strict vegetarian for 40 years, and here she is cooking me a steak dinner. Now you're entering. You're spoiling what we just said there, Bob. So stop now, quick.
Hey, listen. There's a couple of other questions here. Bob, one of them is from somebody who's been quite vocal in the chat this evening, talking about what you were just saying about coronal mass ejections, and saying 1859, no one was using electricity. It didn't affect the whole planet, and that's giving them an aneurysm, what you said. So can you expand on that?
It was Richard Carrington who first discovered the first bright flare at that time. And yes, although the whole world wasn't using electricity, there was still the telegraph.
Exactly, and somebody actually answered that in chat, Bob. And of course, there was no protection on those early telegraph wires, were there?
No, there weren't. And when we remember all the damage that was done then, 1921, 1989, all I can say is that there were only about a dozen polar routes flown a month as little as 25 years ago. And nowadays there are thousands of airplanes taking polar routes, and that's the ones that are most damaged or most put the people in jeopardy from higher radiation. They lose their signals because they don't have the capability of the high frequency radio communications, and so the planes have to change their routes at a time when the sun has major coronal mass ejections. These days we're more reliant than ever on high voltage power lines, on satellites, on electronics, on pipelines, and on an infrastructure that was far less sensitive just a matter of a few decades ago. So we're more vulnerable, not less, to the vagaries of the sun.
And it's being taken really quite seriously as well. You know, somebody's making comments that, you know, CMEs go largely unnoticed now. Well, we've got new space telescopes monitoring the sun in 3 dimensions, specifically in 3 dimensions, so that we've got a far better idea of when any coronal mass ejection could possibly affect
There has
Earth.
never been a better time for monitoring the sun. We have an armada of spacecraft with names like Trace, ACE that is, SOHO, Source, Stereo, the new SDO, that is the Solar Dynamics Observatory, studying the sun with methodology we didn't have recently. For example, a helioseismology is a field of endeavor of studying the pulsations of the sun's surface akin to studying earthquake tremors on Earth that didn't exist a mere 15 years ago. So it is an exciting time for advancements in our knowledge of the sun.
So guys, just really quick, an update. Gerard is telling me that the clouds have been moving in on them. You can probably see it a little bit in the imaging, but we're getting close to wrapping up the broadcast anyway. We've got about 9 minutes. The show will end officially in about 9 minutes. Before we get off, I just want to, again, say a special thanks to Bob Berman, astronomer Bob Berman, and Astronomy Magazine columnist. Here's his book. I'm going to put it up here on the screen again. The Sun's Heartbeat. It's a great read. Bob, I did read it. I know you've accused me many times of not reading it. There is no Cliff Notes version of it, so I have to read it. So I'm forced to read your book. But anyway, Bob, thanks again for coming on. We always love having you on. I also want to thank
pleasure.
Thanks Paul Cox for joining us as well. He's been with Slooh from pretty much the get-go. Almost 8, 10. Have you been on 10 years now, Paul? Did you get in at the very beginning?
2004 is when I discovered Slooh.
Right. So you've been with Slooh for a very long time, and Paul works on their equipment. He takes care of it. He interacts with the members.
Well, I've been a paying member. I've been a paying member all that time. So
I like that. I didn't know that.
Hey guys, you have to tell me. Is it really misogynist or sexist to confess that your wife made you dinner? Is that?
No,
really?
I think that it was a valid comment. It was about addressing potential stereotypes, and so no, the comment wasn't made in any real negative way.
No, Bob, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, Bob.
I mean, I cook dinner if I were any good at it.
Well, actually, it was a lady scientist who got me interested in science as a tiny tot. I saw the film of Marie Curie and her discovering of radium, and that got me into science. Bob, there's a question for you, which is kind of along the same kind of... Go on, Pat.
No. I just wanted to finish up really quick because it's going to end pretty shortly here. I do want to give Gerard. I'll give you a shout after the show, buddy, and we'll talk. What we're doing with Gerard is we're donating some books for school children, Slooh books. They're no longer available at retail, but they're cards with 200-minute access, and we're going to be shipping them to him to the school of his choice for the kids for his work today. That's what he wanted as compensation, and we, again, I really appreciate all the work that he's done out there. It's too bad he couldn't join the show. But Gerard, we'll get in touch with you shortly with that. And I do want to thank Jonathan Bradshaw, Steve Massey, and Rob Black, who are going to provide us a Queensland feed that ran into a bandwidth problem. They had 300 high school kids they were doing a live broadcast with at the school, the Home Hill High School, but I don't know, they had some sort of outage and he couldn't do anything. He was pretty bummed out about it. But anyway, guys, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that list Joe Brimacombe as well, and the guys down in Tennant's Creek who we couldn't get. Joe, though, did email me some of the images, and this is why he couldn't get his feed online. He was just clouded out. So that was a bit of a shame. Bob, the question was to you, who was it, not what, but who was it that got you interested in astronomy?
There was not a who. It was my, I think, destiny, if one believes in destiny. The very first memory I have in life, it was being in a carriage or a stroller. I'm not sure what, but I remember looking up into the night sky. It was my earliest image of life, and so I've been drawn to it since I was a child.
Right.
That's great. That's great. So, guys, we're down to our last. Oh, go ahead.
When are you going to get interested in astronomy?
Hey, man, when the app came out, I got into it now. Now that the app's out, I'm finally like, oh, I can actually do this now.
I could do this. It's simple.
I could actually do this now. The app, it makes my life so much easier.
Great.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's why you guys are here, to help out with that. Anyway, guys, we have about 5 minutes left in the broadcast. I do want to bring it up again. You know, membership funds all the free programming we do. I know some of you out there don't like me pitching it every 15, 20 minutes, but it's the truth. And so with the iPad app now, more of you can participate. We will be coming out with an iPhone version of it. And I know some of you have been asking about Android. That's on the drawing board as well. It's all there. It's just that we're releasing the iPad version first. We thought that was the best platform to do it on, to get kind of our feet wet with this, and then we'll expand from there. But just by booking missions, to see some objects makes a huge difference for the organization. So please consider if you do have an iPad. If not, go to the membership section, sign up, become a member. The fees are very low for what you get to be able to do. And if you can't afford those, just, there is a donation button there. You can do that as well. It's always appreciated. But anyway, guys, I do want to, again, thank everyone for the participation in this. It is a lot of work, as Paul was alluding to earlier when someone was expressing themselves about our feeds. That's what it takes. This stuff takes multiple feeds. I could easily have taken them all out of the system and said, hey, we got one great feed. You probably wouldn't have known then. So we do show you that these are all live. That's the point.
Well, we were also we were staying hopeful as well, Pat, that we were going to be able to bring some of those online throughout the coverage.
We never know. Well, so. We never know if they're going to come on. That's why we have them on. We have that in part of our back end. It's the way we set these feeds up, and we can turn them on and off once they start rolling in. So. Anyway.
And of course, it should be said that the Slooh observatories, when an event tracks across a place that it can be seen directly from the Slooh observatories, we use our own observatory.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
And sometimes we've had me and other Slooh people actually travel off to cover this stuff ourselves. So
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah. In fact, we'll do more of that. So.
Yeah, a shout out, Pat, to all the people who have been playing nicely in Slooh Conversations. It's been entertaining there. It's always nice to hear some of the nice words as well. It's a shame that some people don't know how to act in public, but anyway. But yeah, it's great over there, and you can. I will shout out my email address. How many people do this to you? If you want to know anything about Slooh or anything that we've covered tonight, you can email me at coxy@slooh.com. That's COXY @slooh.com. And if I can't answer the question, then I'll make sure that your email gets to the person who can. The person who put their email address into Slooh Conversations to be contacted, I have grabbed that, and I will be sending you an email.
Very good. All right, guys. Well, we're going to be counting down to the last couple minutes here. What will happen is we'll go back. The live feed on the homepage of Slooh.com will end. Gerard's feed will end. And we want to say thank you again, Gerard. I'll be in touch with you shortly, if not today, tomorrow at some point. I'm sure you're really tired. You've been up for a long time. But and the hangout here will end here shortly. Bob, any last thoughts before we get off?
Well, I want to say that I thought it was beautiful. I understand a person saying, hey, do you have to mention Slooh app, but you have to realize that we're very proud at Slooh is very proud of putting together a free app that lets people control telescopes to see any object in the universe for 99 cents, I think. I mean, who does that? So even that, even though it sounds like advertising and that's the money stream that lets us do the free stuff here, even that is a service to the world. So I don't think we have anything to be embarrassed about.
Well said, that man.
Good. Bob, you're amazing. I'm going to make you the official pitch man now.
You can come back.
Okay.
You can come back again. So why don't we mix it up? For the next event, let's mix it up. Have Bob do the Slooh sales. I'll still do some background work, keeping feeds running, and maybe Pat, you can take on the astronomy expert hat.
I'll be the color man. Yeah, I'll tell you everything about anything you want to know, guys.
That'll be an interesting show. Don't miss it. Anyone.
Well, if I was in that position, I would be telling you that there was a comet on the way to hit Earth. We're all gonna die.
Oh no!
All right.
Now you said it.
So
we've just lost all credibility there, Bob. So we've spent 2.5 hours trying to build it up.
All right. I think we should end on that note then.
Yeah, the bell is tolling on, so we're good. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining our broadcast. Again, join. You get do a lot of fun stuff like this. We do a lot of other programming as well. Paul does a lot of stuff for the members, so consider it. All right, guys. Thank you for joining the broadcast. Thank you, Gerard and company, and for Space Camera. This is Patrick Palucci. I'm sorry, it's hard to monitor, and so just come to slooh.com and you can ask questions to Bob or whoever is out there, and we'll take care of you there. My name is Patrick Palucci with Slooh, and we are starting to pull live feeds. Bob, what I'd like to do before we even get started here is maybe we can start with the basics to let people know what exactly is starting to happen today over in Australia as we start to look at live feeds. What's going to happen, and really, maybe make it as simplest as you can. Talk about what this is all about. What is this annular eclipse?
Well, simply put, the most important celestial objects to us, the moon and the sun, will form a straight line with Earth, a perfectly straight line called syzygy. People sometimes say it's a good Scrabble word, but it really isn't, because it's 3 Y's and there's only 2 Y's in Scrabble, so you'd have to use a blank, and who wants to do that? But there it is. Syzygy, straight line of celestial objects, and what it'll mean to us is the moon will appear directly in front of the sun, leaving a ring of fire, nuclear fire, around the edge of the sun, and we're going to be seeing it live as it's happening.
So, guys, what we have today is we basically have 4 feeds set up, and I thought I'd talk really quick about the feed location so you knew what was going on. We're going to be pulling one from the Northwest Territory of Australia. Gerard Lazarus is going to be providing that feed for us right now. It's just a sample pick in there. It's still early morning, so he should have sun picks coming in. We also have another one coming out from Queensland, Australia, at the Home Hill High School from NQ Astronomy with Rob Black. He will be providing us a feed as well. And we actually have another one in Cairns, Australia, which is currently offline. They are telling us that weather issues are causing it. And we have another feed hopefully coming in from Tennant Creek, which we're still waiting for it to come online. So those are our main 4 feeds. And we have another one from Prescott Observatory that Matt is sharing with us as well, from images that he took a few days ago, I believe, or sometime in the past.
Last Friday.
Tornado. Last Friday, and we can talk more about that in a second. So, Bob, if you recall last year, in November, it was in November, we had a total solar eclipse, almost in the same location. Is that normal that would happen like that?
Well, it's all part of the tick-tock gear meshing system of the moon going around the Earth and the Earth going around the sun. In order to have a total eclipse, the moon has to be in the nearer half of the orbit, closer to the nearer third of its orbit, to appear large enough to us to completely cover the sun. It's an amazing coincidence that the moon and the sun both appear pretty much the same size. I mean, we only have 2 disks in our sky, the moon and the sun. Everything else are dots. Stars look like dots. Planets look like dots. 2 disks, And just imagine that. One is 400 times farther away, but 400 times larger. So the two appear the same size. Now, the difference is that because the moon doesn't have a round orbit, but an elliptical orbit, if it's near the nearer part, as it was last November, then we get a total solar eclipse. If it's perfectly lined up, but near the farther half of the orbit,
Hi everyone, this is Patrick Palucci with Slooh Space Camera. Thank you for joining us today. It's May 9th here in the United States. We're here to provide a live feed of the Annular Solar Eclipse that's currently taking place right as it's starting pretty soon here over Australia. We're going to have about a two and a half hour show for you today. We're just getting started live here, and we're going to be pulling our feed here shortly. If you're on the Slooh.com homepage, you may be seeing some test imagery appearing. That is just from our partners out there who are running some tests. They will be imaging the sun shortly. It's morning time there right now in Australia, so the sun is pretty low. And as it starts to rise, you'll start seeing some live images coming in. We have a great panel for you today of experts and Slooh staff who will be talking today and outlining some things that are happening with the annular eclipse. I also want to point out that if you guys have an iPad out there, make sure you download our free Slooh iPad app, where you can actually watch this broadcast as well as do some fun activities by booking missions on our robotic space cameras located all over the world. We'll be talking more about that later, but if you do go to Slooh.com in box number 3, you'll see a demo there as well of that product. With us today is longtime Slooh friend, astronomer Bob Berman. He writes for Astronomy Magazine. Bob, how you doing today?
great to be here.
Bob is the author of The Sun's Heartbeat, for those of you who don't know. It's a great book. I've actually read it. Bob doesn't believe me, but I actually have read it, and it's a great book, so definitely check it out. We also have Matt Francis from Prescott Observatory in Arizona. Unfortunately, with Matt, he is a little rained out right now. So what we're doing is he's going to be providing some imagery he took a few days ago, or whenever it was, of this tornado that took place on the sun. So he actually captured that, and he's going to be presenting that in the reticle viewer on Slooh.com. You can see that right now. We also have Slooh engineer and outreach coordinator Paul Cox with us. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Hi.
And guys, so here we are today. We are tracking the annular solar eclipse, and you'll start seeing some feeds on Slooh.com. Paul Cox has actually started the process of screen sharing a few of them in here, and I'll click on the box here so you guys can see it. Again, the main presentation's over on Slooh, so you can certainly, if you're watching this in the G+ Hangout somewhere on the web, whether it be over in on our own space camera page or over on another site, you can certainly watch it here, there if you like, but the main presentation is going to be on Slooh, and that's where the conversation section is. So if you are watching this and you have a question, go to the Slooh conversation section on Slooh.com. We don't monitor the YouTube ones because it just gets jam-packed.
Then it leaves a ring or annulus of sunlight, a ring of fire around the sun, and that's what's happening today.
I've got a little diagram actually that I'm screen sharing into the Hangout there, Pat, which actually shows the kind of geometry that Bob's talking about there, the difference between the total eclipse and the annular eclipse.
Yeah, in fact, I just put that in the Hangout here. If you're listening to this in the iPad app, unfortunately you can't see this, but we're looking at the difference of the two. So Bob, when this eclipse happened in November, and you were there actually on the coast of Cairns with, believe it, with Matt,
yes,
watching this, and can you tell us, I mean, I think they're both spectacular, but there's a huge difference in your opinion, obviously. You think the total solar is just almost spiritual in nature.
That's right. That's right. It's not just me. It would be anybody who has seen one. I mean, in a total eclipse like the one we had on November 13th past, the stars come out. You can actually see geysers of nuclear fire shooting into the sky from the edge of the moon. The animals go crazy. People weep. I don't think anyone's going to actually cry during this one. So I'd say an annular eclipse is interesting. It's fascinating. It's lovely to see that ring of fire. But a total solar eclipse is life-changing. It's life-altering. And they're also rare. We have an annular eclipse almost every year. Interestingly enough, usually 1 year minus 11 days because the moon's orbit. It's interesting. Not just the moon goes around us, its orbit goes around us. And so the crossing point where it's on the same plane as the Earth and the Sun, called the nodes, because of the nodal month is a little different, and it moves in a retrograde fashion relative to the others. Each year, the moon crosses the nodes 11 days earlier. So last year we had a eclipse of this type, an annular eclipse, on May 20th. This year it's on May 9th. Notice it's 11 days earlier. And next year we're going to have one at the end of April. So consecutive years for annular eclipses, each time 11 days earlier.
Great, great. Well, I'm just got a note from one of our feed partner in the Northwest Territory of Australia that the sun is starting to come up, so he is starting to image right now. So we should start seeing that in the feed that's labeled, what is that called? NWT, I believe, is how we got it labeled there. Yeah, that should be coming up. And I know the guys over at Queensland are also fighting a little bit of poor weather, but he had mentioned that it was starting to clear. So we should have some updates rolling in here shortly on those two feeds.
Can I share a bit of information? Because some people have been asking in Slooh conversations on the homepage, when will we see anything? I've got some timings for you. By the way, if people can keep language polite on there, because we have a lot of kids watching our shows as well. But people might not be aware that the eclipse in Australia is actually happening as
Okay, I'm running some tests here. Making sure this is working.
I like your book there in the background, Bob.
You notice that?
Yes, it's very clear.
What's really happening in the background is spring.
Oh,
that's
nice.
out the window. It's just magic.
Beautiful. Wow.
Okay, let's see how we're doing here. The Slooh show will begin in about 5 minutes, guys. About 5 minutes.
So has Michael told you that he's thinking of switching weeks for the ISON trip?
Yes, and it was very kind of you to. He so wanted to go on the same one you're going on. It was very kind of you to agree to switch if he needs it.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. I'd rather go on the tour with Michael. I mean, that'll just be fun.
That's good. That's good.
Okay, guys, we're going to start in about 5 minutes.
Have you told George that we didn't find any flying saucers in his galaxy group?
No, I did. I forwarded your letter to him.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm still gonna, assuming my weather clears. It's been weird. It has been raining in the afternoon here, and then um, right around 11 p.m. it just clears up, and I've got a clear sky.
Hmm.
So if that happens again, I'm going to take some long exposures of that group.
That's a very strange report, don't you think?
I thought it was really strange. I mean, the guy doesn't sound like a kook or anything. He sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Exactly.
So that's what makes it strange. But
Especially
it just seems like. Go
and
ahead.
he described the dots moving at different speeds too. Very strange.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes me think, whatever he saw that night. I would be surprised if we caught anything again.
Well, didn't he say in the second letter that he saw it a second night?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Look at. Yeah, he saw 2 nights.
Wow.
And what I'm
okay.
thinking are flocks of birds, because in migration season, I've seen birds at all different distances in front of celestial objects.
Mm-hmm. And they can show up as dots, I guess, going at different
I
speeds.
guess if they were far enough and maybe it was low power.
Yeah. Huh.
Maybe lit up from the ground lights or something, showing up faintly illuminated. And the galaxy is faint enough.
Yeah.
All right, guys, let's see.
Oh, that's weird. Okay, that's better.
Okay, we're about 3 minutes away. 3 minutes away.
Okay. Well, it's whenever the G Plus thing starts on the Slooh website, I get this horrible echo. I have to go in there and mute that.
Yeah, you got to mute it.
Okay.
Okay, guys.
Do you see my first image in there, Pat?
I'm not looking. Maybe Paul could tell us.
Or Paul?
I'm just going to have a look. Yes.
Okay, great.
It's quite a tight crop on that, Matt. You might want to put a bit of boundary black on the canvas, maybe, if you can.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I can do that. Let me go in here.
Okay, guys, we're going to start up here in a few seconds. Just waiting for the live show to begin on the homepage about T-minus 1 minute.